So Gareth, could you go to slide please too?
Yeah, with me.
So the meeting objectives, I understand these were circulated and agreed upon together, is to build an understanding of how different groups working in the livestock sector are using vocabularies or ontologies to organise their knowledge, share use cases and challenges from new initiatives needing to describe knowledge and data, identify whether currently available vocabularies or ontologies can serve the needs of these initiatives, and then identify what kind of collaborations or future work is needed to address these, and what role can this working group play to move this forward. So I don't know if this was agreed by everyone in the group, or it was some suggestions by you, Vanessa.
I think it's been mentioned, but we want to see if there's buy-in to this sort of.
Okay, great. So the purpose of the ontology working group, as we've defined it here, is to share knowledge, bring people together, which we've achieved that today, connect people with challenges to people with solutions, and then I suggested another one, whether there's an opportunity to roadmap a future plan or develop strategies. That's good. Megan's nodding, so I'm pleased about that. So the next slide.
Any objections?
They might have merged during the day. So what can this community achieve? Well, certainly we can promote the work and help people make use of the existing ontologies. We can test, review existing standards and validate terms, and see if they meet people's needs. And also we can map, help link existing ontologies and vocabularies and identify gaps. I'm sure there's other things we can do as well, but that's a reasonable start.
And if I can just add, when we say we, I think we mean we.
Yes, yeah, the collective, everyone around this table and on the Skype line. Yep. If there's any comments, please butt in. I think everyone looks okay. So Gareth, could you? Mm-hmm. I've just put up the timetable for the morning. So we're just doing a quick introduction. It's a little bit behind, but I'm sure we'll make it up. We're going to move into an icebreaker now. And then there's going to be a very short session on getting on the same page. And then we've got a series of 5 sessions which will help us sort of surface some of the challenges and work through them through a mixture of presentations and interactive sessions. So hopefully that's okay with everyone, and hope you have a really good day. Yeah. And I'll hand back to Vanessa.
Thank you. So maybe just before the icebreaker, just do a very quick round of names and organizations. So I think many of us know some of us. So I'm Vanessa. I'm from SEBI, and I'm here on behalf of the Livestock Data for Decisions community, convening this working group.
I'm Jackie Molina from Wildfish, Penang, and I'm here on behalf of the Fish Ontology Working Group.
I'm Fernando Doria, and I come from the Swedish Veterinary National Institute.
Valentine, I'm working with the International Livestock Research Institute.
I'm Ava, working for SEBI.
I'm Theodora from SEBI.
I am Marie-Angelique. I work for the Alliance of Biodiversity and SEAT.
I've already introduced myself, Karen Smith.
Hi, I'm Louise from SEBI. Hi, I'm Megan Bruce from the Global Burden of Animal Disease Project. I work at the University of Liverpool. I mean, no, I don't. I'm telling lies already.
Where do you work?
Who are you really?
History.
So the need to know them.
I'm Alap. I work for SEBI.
And it's his second day on the job.
Yeah.
I'm Gareth, and I'm SEBI as well. If you want to go online and
let's have a quick name.
yeah.
You can just
Maybe you can just take them out.
you can just take that off.
Can you guys hear us online? If you'd just like to introduce yourselves, maybe if we start with Georgina.
Hello, I'm Georgina Cherry. I work for the Veterinary Health Information Engine at University of Surrey, where I'm data scientist.
Great, and maybe Elizabeth?
Arnaud. I work for Biodiversity Slate Alliance as well, and I'm leading several ontology projects, and I collaborate with Marie, and we're mainly on plants.
Thank you. It's Lala. Are you there?
Yes, hello everyone. It's Lala Gizio, and I work for the OIE, the World Organization for Animal Health, with also Dr. Lena Moore, who is unfortunately unable to join us now, but perhaps later on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane, are you there?
Hi all, I'm Jane Poole. I work with Peter at Hillary. I'm an applied statistician.
And finally, Sophie, are you there?
Hi everyone, I am Sophie Aubin from INRA. I'm working at the Scientific and Technical Information Department, and I've been associated to the dissemination work on the ATOL, EOL, and AOL ontologies.
Great, thank you.
Maybe I can just ask a quick question to Sophie. Sophie, can you hear me? Are you by any chance wanting to present? Because Marie-Christine sent a presentation, but I know she couldn't come. But I don't know if you coordinated with her or you're here sort of on your own.
No, I could not coordinate with her because I didn't expect to participate in this meeting, but finally I had the opportunity to.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, perfect. Let me turn this off.
I can just
yeah, screen off. Okay, good. Thanks everyone. So we're going to do a really quick kind of icebreaker exercise. And I'm going to start with a bit of individual reflection for 1 minute. And if you can just, you can jot notes down and essentially think about what is your most pressing question for this group related to livestock ontologies and vocabularies. So think about it individually, write it down. After a minute, I'm going to ask you to get into pairs, and that's why I wanted you to sit next to people who you don't already work with. So see if you can turn to someone you don't already work with and discuss that. And after another few minutes, those pairs will join another pair and have a little quick discussion on that, and then we'll share back with the group. So essentially we want to sort of bring out some ideas. What are the most important ideas and questions emerging from this little group? Is that okay? So start on your own, and then after a minute passes, I'll just let you know, and we'll get into pairs.
What's the question again?
What is your most pressing question for this meeting in relation to livestock ontologies or vocabularies? For this group, I mean. And the online people, you can do the same. You can think individually, and then I think maybe you can have a little group chat in the chat box.
Yes. Are we still set? I don't know.
Maybe 10, 20 more seconds if you all kind of come up with your questions, then yeah, then go ahead and start talking to your neighbor, and I'll give you 2 minutes.
Oh, that's too fast. I took all your time.
Vocabulary for entertaining.
Presentation.
Oh, yeah. Who's talking with her?
There is
You can annotate the and throw it into the area.
What's your
don't have to hear from every group if not every group wants to share back, but essentially we want to hear sort of the top 1 or 2 ideas from each group. And I think we're going to start with the online group because they've been having a really active chat. And I'm wondering if there's any volunteers who want to...
There is. Georgina has volunteered.
Getting quick. Right. We've been having a really good discussion around existing ontologies. So you shared some in September. I think you sent them to me yesterday. I don't seem to have the password to get at them, but that seems to be a really good starting point to actually see what's already there and how we can work with it. So Elizabeth says she's looking for ontologies to help with keywords in a metadata schema for data aggregation, or using it for annotation of scientific variables. That also matches the kind of thing I was looking for. Also, the group, how is it going to interact with the ontology COP of the big data platform? I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in because I don't know a great deal about that at the moment.
Thank you, Georgina.
Thank you.
Sort of standardising data descriptions as well.
Yeah, it's a big question. Are you just trying to standardize the metadata, or are you trying to actually standardize like variable names and variable content?
What's the second word?
Or variable names or variable content.
Great.
From my point of view, I've been trying to do both to a point. But then I'm only starting out, so perhaps that will become unmanageable.
Okay, give me a moment. I'm just trying to get their lovely faces back on the screen.
In terms of the COP question, I think we'll have to wait till Elizabeth comes back. She has to step out because I think she leads the main ontologies, the community of practice.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, online group. Which of these groups would like to speak up first? This side or that side? How about that side?
We can start.
Yeah.
So we were discussing about how to develop a workable common ontology, and Marie said that this is you can do that by building up a number of case examples and then just expanding them out. And she didn't see it as daunting as I did, so that was very positive. But then we sort of continued on in the discussion to how do we then encourage others to do the same. And we decided that, you know, we've got a lot of representation around the table, including online, and including OIE, people involved in the big data platform, and other organisations involved in livestock data issues. So we're bringing in some sort of legitimacy. So whether we have to sort of cement this group as a group that is leading the way and develop a strategy, I'm not sure. But sort of cementing ourselves as leading this area to get more buy-in from the wider community.
Great. So it's about the role of the group.
Yeah. Well, others may have other comments.
Thanks. Okay, this group here.
We had two different groups because Jacqueline
Yes.
and we were already ontology converts. So our question was, we had the exact same question: how do we move forward coordinately, kind of being aware of each other's efforts so that we can move forward in a way that complement each other's values. And this group had more questions exactly about what would be the value of an ontology, why should we use it, how do we use it, why use it as opposed to vocabulary. So there was two distinct groups, one investigating, wants to take out of this today the value of ontology and how it will help on their work. And Jacqueline and I were more like, yes, ontology, how do we do it together?
Yeah. That's really great.
So we talk quite a lot about the importance of a group,
Yeah.
the sequencing of planning and testing and coordinating.
Yeah.
And what was you call avoiding stepping on toes?
Yeah, it's just we reflecting on the community purpose that Karen put out, promote, test, and map. And I was just kind of making the claim that map should come first, because by the time you're promoting or testing something, you've already developed it, and you may end up have done something that someone else was already working with, and you could have kind of added value to each other. So almost mapping the efforts first, and then I have an idea for how we could maybe have a place where we kind of put a diagram of what we're working with, so that we see, okay, I need to contact her, I can contact her 2 years from now, and then just map what's going on, and then also, you know, who are the people you're working closer, and then you can promote and test.
So I sort of said that Francesca said she'd gone to effort mapping it, and we haven't even done that. And so really a big part of this community for me would be around knowledge exchange.
Yeah.
And if people have already done work, it would be really helpful to see what they've done. But then actually also then being a use case, being able to test it out and look for perhaps gaps, and then highlighting those gaps and see if anyone else has a need for what we need.
Yeah.
It would be really helpful
And
as a community, and as a community, if we're all working in the same area.
And that's a really good point, to be able to identify who are the consumers and who are the producers.
Yeah, I think we're very much, we would, you know, like, yes, exactly, who are the consumers and producers, and it would be great that it could be quite a you know, mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much, everyone. So I wasn't part of the discussion, unfortunately. I was doing some techie things, but my own question just coming in maybe links to what's going to be presented next. And my own question related to the work that we're doing in study is actually, do we need an ontology, or for what our purposes are, do we need a vocabulary? And to that end, we've asked Marie-Angelique to come and present a really quick flash talk from her perspective on just making sure that we all are talking about the same thing. What do we mean when we say ontology? What do we mean when we say vocabulary? Just getting our terms straight. I know some of us are quite new to this. And while she's coming up, I'll just do a quick vote, show of hands. So I'm thinking about 3 categories of people. I'll read them out, think about who you are, and then we'll do a show of hands. So group 1, I love and use ontologies, but I don't know livestock. Group 2, I know livestock, and I want to use or fish, and want to use an existing ontology or vocabulary, but I'm not an ontology expert. Group 3, I know and love and work with both livestock and fish and ontologies and vocabularies. So if you think you fall into one of these groups, then we'll take a show of hands. And if you think you don't fall into one of those groups, I'd be very curious to understand who you are. So group 1, I love and use ontologies, but I don't know livestock. 1. And online?
You got some typing happening.
Elizabeth Elno has put her hand up. Good, it makes sense. Okay, great. And then group 2, I know livestock and want to use an existing ontology vocabulary, but I'm not an ontology expert. Cool. Great. And group 3, I work with both livestock and ontologies and vocabularies.
Oh, wow.
Good. Great. Now, does anyone feel like none of those groups described them don't fit into these categories?
Well, I guess I have to say, like, the middle one, which is I know and love livestock, and I use ontologies. Well, I have to admit, I've never actually used one before. So, yeah, I was probably making myself a little bit bigger than I should be. But I really want to. I mean, I see the benefit and I look at them and so.
Great. So we see, we're kind of in similar, some people are in the same boat, some people are in different boats. Okay, so I'll invite Marie-Angelique to come up, please.
So
do you want me to run it for you?
I can change the slide myself.
Not from there. If you stand here, you can, or I can do it for you.
I'm going to do that because it will slide out very fast. So.
Okay.
Elizabeth is back, so we wanted to see expand on her integration with the COP.
Maybe we can do that just after.
Okay, so
I'm gonna try to explain quickly what is the difference between ontologies and vocabulary and what they can help with. So why do we need them? And for that, I'm gonna take two main use cases. And depending on the use case then that you need, you're gonna decide if you're more like going for a vocabulary would be enough or if an ontology would be best. So I'm just taking like an example from biodiversity. There are 7 words that can be used to search for banana data. So here it's our dataverse where we have all our data, and you can see that if I search, it's an old slide. So now there's probably more data set on that, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, if I search for banana, I get 7 data sets. If I search using Musa, I get only 6 data sets. If I search using banane, like the French word, like, only 1 data set. So, you really understand that, having a common vocabulary that can help making this link between synonymous terms will really help, like, to find more data accurately. So that was the first use case. And for that, I really think like a vocabulary, like associated with some metadata schema, can really help, like, for that. And I'm going to take like a second example, so where really we want to do integration of different data sets at the variable level. So I'm interested in integrative to agronomic data set in this example. And so this is a very good data set where, you have like, you can understand every column, you have the data, but then you can see some inconsistency. So this is and this is still a good data set. So without any context, first it's very hard to understand. So if I give you just that, you don't know why what has been done or anything. So a row is a series of observation at a location. I can understand that by looking at the columns. But what does each column means exactly? They can be a mixture of things. They can be like, you see, there are several sites, there are several times, so it's not easy to understand that. And again, what the specific cell mean is here for the tillage practice, I have only CA and CP. If I'm not an expert, I don't know what this is. So how can we make that more clear? And the idea is to use like several ontologies, so the data set can become something like that, where if I take like the example of the tillage practice, now I have an identifier that represents that, and if I follow the URL, the URI of this identifier, I will get information that both a human can understand, but also a machine. So really, if I'm trying to integrate like data set at this level, I will go more for an ontology, because I will have links between not only classification of things, but also links between like a plot and a country and tillage and like a crop, like all that in a graph will be like, it's not vertical, it's going to be more horizontal. So yeah, and as a result, the data can be easily shared, it can be easily integrated, it's searchable in an efficient way, and also I can run some quality check on it to be sure that there's no outliers or mistakes or typos or things like that. So what is a control vocabulary? Here I'm more on the definition, so it's really a shared vocabulary of a given domain. So that's really important to try to focus on small modular vocabularies instead of big structure that provide textual definition of all the terms, that provide also like synonyms and all of that. And also, like usually a control vocabulary, if it's machine readable, it should contain like identifier for every concept that is defined. And really, vocabularies are really for facilitating the data publication and the data access, as I say. So if you search for broad data sets. And mainly, I would say that they are intended to be used by humans. So they are easy to understand and all of that. And on the other end, what is an ontology? So an ontology is a vocabulary of a domain. So everything that I said before is true. So you have identifier for classes, but also for the properties. So the links between like your concepts. So you will have a textual definition, but what you will have in addition is like these machine readable actions that's gonna be used by machine to really understand the meaning of things. And because of this axiom, then it's going to facilitate the integration of the access because of the vocabulary, but it's going to also facilitate like the analysis of the data by computers. And so really then they are intended to be used by computers mainly. And yeah, that's it. 5 minutes, I hope I did it.
Thank you so much.
If you have any questions.
Any questions for Melanie? Anyone learned something they didn't know before?
I think the examples were great.
Good. So you have a controlled vocabulary. Is the ontology, would you just say that's an added bolt-on, or do you have to decide right from the beginning that the way in which you're developing the...
Yeah, so most of the time I would say that the ontology starts from the vocabulary. So you have the control vocabulary, and then depending on the use case that you have or the model that you want, then you're going to build like the missing links and add the semantics that you need to really answer with your question. So yeah, I think if you already have a vocabulary, it's already a good start.
Any questions online? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask, is there specific examples where you say we don't really need an ontology? Yeah, so can you give us one of those?
Yeah, so like I said, like if you just want to use them as metadata, so to search for data sets,
okay.
Yeah, then you don't need the
really.
structure. You don't need to know, like, I don't know, that my crop grow in the field and the field has location and all of that. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it just helps with sort of like a standard
query. Yeah, a standard language just to be able to be sure that we all using the same, and then we can retrieve like information consistently.
And we have your presentation available, so people can refer to it if needed in the future. Were there any questions online, Gara?
No.
No. Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
There was a round of applause emoji.
Yeah. That's nice. Okay. So now that we're on the same page, we're going to move on, and I thought we would hear from one group of people who are doing something in the domain of describing livestock knowledge. Maybe it's not the kind of top gear ontology, but it's something in that domain, and it's worth understanding what different people in our community are doing. So we're going to have Peter Valentine. He's going to describe, and you can tell me, maybe you've renamed your presentation, about using a limited livestock vocabulary under CG space. We were supposed to have someone from INRA on the animal health ontology for livestock. She has sent a presentation. I made it available, but we're not going to go through it because she's not here to present it, and I'm not comfortable giving her presentation. So hopefully that's useful, further reading. And then we're going to hear from Fernanda on her work around developing an animal health ontology. Okay, great. So I'll put your presentation up, Peter, and then you can.
Yeah, I'll come over there, I think.
Yeah, you can just run it from here. And I just wanted to add, we don't have scheduled breaks, so if people need a comfort break, whatever, just take your own time.
There's a security alert here.
What have you done? It doesn't want to.
You have to do this first.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it's okay.
Protect me from unknown content. Yes? Protect me?
Okay. Yeah, good.
What kind of presentation?
When you phrase it like that.
Somebody missing? I guess I should go in a second.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I just don't.
Okay, I guess I'm gonna just talk a little bit about a kind of a use case. I'm coming more from the knowledge management communication side rather than ontologies, and talk a little bit about how I use the word. I definitely didn't want to talk about ontologies. Vocabularies might have been better. I ended up using taxonomies, but probably I meant to use vocabularies. I'm just going to talk about how we've been using them in a way to support the kind of the sharing, the communication, the publishing. So it's really a kind of a use case of what you do with a bit of a structured vocabularies. Jane Poole is online. She's much, and I think I'm not going to talk about many of the scientists when they collect data. They use a very structured ways of collecting. You're mapping what you collect to a livestock production system. So there are a whole other sort of systems of describing as kind of part of the data collection process and analysis. I'm not going to talk about that. So what I want to do is just run through a few things. So I joined ILRI about 10 years ago, and I want to just position in a sense this work, what we did, what we were doing. So we wanted then a proper repository in a sense. We had our knowledge products were kind of all over the place. We wanted a website. We had a homemade website that had files stored everywhere, and we were very keen to use different social media platforms, yeah, just to kind of really communicate and share and have sort of organized flows, I'm calling it, all right? And we were looking for ways to organize the flows in a sense, to describe, but really also to publish. We weren't just into the business of let's describe things, but let's make things move. We had a lot of homemade websites and databases, and there were public ones and semi-public, and there were lots of homemade internal databases of all kinds. So the map of vaguely what it looked like in the end of 2008. There was kind of stuff all over the place. Yeah, so I came in 2000. This is microfiche. Probably most of you have ever seen microfiche, but anyway, we had a huge amount of microfiche, and we had things all over. So we said, how do we rationalize all of this, and how? I'm going to talk a little bit about how we try to introduce some kind of taxonomies or terminologies or word lists. So what we want to do, we want to make it open. We want to use open platforms, no DIY, build my own platform. We already had quite a few. We wanted to allow and encourage, the content to move. We didn't want to have one place with everything in one portal or some such. Portals was a bit like the word we were trying to avoid. Have the content move and reach different places. And we wanted to have descriptors or metadata that could organize the content across all of these different places. Yeah, and so we thought of using a taxonomy to facilitate publishing. So of course we were archiving and describing and posterity and open access, but we were very keen to communicate and publish using the terminology to help us. And when I arrived, the Deputy Director General for Research said, I want the science to be communicated. Yeah, I want it to be out there. So those were kind of what we were trying to do. So what we've come up with, we use quite a lot of different metadata. I'm talking more about kind of the knowledge management side rather than the data side. So there are crosswalks. So we have used AgriVoc. The problem for us has been that AgriVoc, it's almost impossible to kind of have an interface. You have to kind of go on, but for the people who are actually indexing content, you have to kind of go and search and query. It's very difficult within our DSpace to integrate this in a very kind of smart way. So we do use AgriVoc. It's rather large and massive, and that's used across different places. We apply Dublin Core, of course, the Dublin Core fields, and nowadays we have a CGIR has a kind of a CG core that we've been working towards. That's more about the CG world. And then we came up, and this is probably more what Vanessa had in mind, we came up with kind of ILRI-specific descriptor lists that would help us publish and share across platforms. Yeah. So the idea was these would be used in the repository, which is on a thing called CG Space, but also on our blogs, on our SlideShare, all those places. We were looking for something that we used across the whole organization to kind of describe and organize the content for publishing and reuse. So we were not looking at it to analyze, to do that. It's really kind of a tool to share and exchange, to kind of crosswalks, yeah? So it's a bit different from what the ontologies we saw just now. And so we have about 100 or so terms that we've been using. And where did they come from? Early 2010, I engaged with the science and communication people. We said, what are the big things that are important for ILRI? Yeah, so this is not a livestock term list, this is an ILRI term list. We were very pragmatic. We weren't sort of saying, let's do this for the world. FAO were running AgriVoc, and they have this global mandate, so we certainly don't want to take any of that on. So what is it that that's important to us? What are we trying to talk about? What do we need to share with each other? Yeah. So we started from AgriVoc, and we created and adapted, and we've added things as we went along. Like I said, we chose terms that would helpfully present on what we do, that could be used across those different platforms. And if you're using like blogs and hashtags on Twitter, those are not so suitable sometimes for ontologies. You're looking for just terms, in a sense, that can help. So we have this small number, and we always have on most of the platforms, you can always have a kind of controlled element, and then people can add in other stuff. Yeah, and we can use alongside all the standard things, countries, languages, regions, and all those, the global things, ISO standards and all the rest. Yeah, so what we have now is a control vocabulary for ILRI. It's not a livestock vocabulary. We absolutely don't claim to have a livestock vocabulary. Other people are doing that. It would be useful if we could integrate somebody else's livestock vocabulary, but technically we have to see how would that integrate with our different platforms, the website, Drupal, the DSpace, and the other bits and pieces. It's very simple, and it's really about publishing. Yeah, the idea was we're not describing to store, we're describing to reuse. That was the whole principle. Yeah, all the public-facing resources are using it. There's a lot of other. We have kind of a domestic agriculture, animal breeding, genetic databases. They have other taxonomies that are much more around species and names and those things. Yeah. So just to give you an example, so this is a record. So this is our CG Space record. So we have all the standard W core fields, and then we have a kind of a set of ILRI descriptors that we assign. We have the AgriVault keywords, other databases, other systems I know auto-generate keywords and stuff, but personally I found that to be not always helpful. So so we have that. When you search DSpace, the whole PDFs, the whole content is normally included in the searches, so you get a lot of stuff. So we wanted to have some way to control. Yeah. The purpose being, so when you do your blog post, yeah, we're using the same terms here. This is not an ontology. It's purely it's a very pragmatic way of using vocabulary. It would be quite nice if behind all of this you had something else, but technically it's quite difficult to integrate. I mean, this is a WordPress what you're looking at, yeah. If I then take that onto the website, which is Drupal, you can't read this, but the same term PPR then integrates the news stories, the publications, the projects, and the people who work on PPR. So it's purely just a very simple indexing metadata type of thing. We're also building a kind of a visualizer for the repositories. So here, if you go in as PPR, it then shows you the same terms associated. I mean, this is a very simple visualization. It'd be quite nice if something deeper was behind this, but this requires a lot more work and effort and standardizing and organizing and resources and all kinds of things. The data portal we have has something similar. They're also using the AgriVault terms and they use the same set. Yeah. So these are used across the different platforms. And I think I'm going to leave you on the last slide. So this is our Flickr, the photo place. And again, we turn these terms into tags or hashtags on Twitter or whatever they might be. So that's the kind of the thinking that came from it. Build something that we can use to communicate, which is a slightly different use case than some of the data management guys. And then if you want to, there's a slider, there's some links, and my favorite slide, it's the sharing is what it's all about. That's what I wanted to share. Maybe Jane wants to add something. When we collect data, people go to the field. She often is part of the process of designing the data collection instruments, and there they do have standard terms that they have to follow. But again, I don't know what standards we follow. So maybe Jane can answer that one, if she heard me.
Yeah. No, it's more in terms of if we have standard tools, then they will have standard field names. But in the data portal currently, we use the same. Well, we use the same descriptors that you used in CG Space about 3 years ago, because when we did it, we linked the two.
Yeah.
But like say for something like species and countries, I think again we use just the same standards.
Yes. Yeah, but Jane, when somebody goes, like for example, if you go and collect gender disaggregated data, we have a kind of that tells you how to do that and defines, and there's this kind of ontology.
The thing is,
terms in there, right?
Well,
we assign people to different categories and stuff like that.
Yeah, but not really, because you've got the tool, then you've got how you describe how you do the field name. So if it's a tool such as Romis, then yes, because everybody will be using the same programming. So if they want income from maize per plot, it will have a standard field name. But if you're not providing the actual tool, the actual ODK or CS Pro, then people have quite a lot of flexibility what they can use.
People are going around with old-fashioned paper surveys or something. You have no idea what we get. But where we're using those standardized tools, there's a kind of a built-in structure, which I guess I don't know how if it's linked to any ontologies or anything like that.
I don't think so. The socioeconomic one is, because it links partially to the work that's been happening in the socioeconomic COP.
Okay.
Because it's the same person driving it fundamentally, but yeah, not in livestock ontology, I don't think.
Okay.
As I say, Karen tried to do that at ILRI, but again, it's within a specific project. So across projects, there isn't standardization.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to share. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Peter. Okay.
Elizabeth, there's a question online from Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, can you want to ask your question?
For the presentation. My question was for the ILRI control vocabulary, do you provide definitions of your term? And second question is, do you provide the missing terms to AgroDoc? I had two questions.
We don't provide definitions. Probably we should. It's just really a list. Do we provide to AgroVoc? No, we haven't done that. We've had many conversations with the FAO folks about also integrating AgroVoc into DSpace, but it's exceedingly difficult, it seems. So we tended to just focus, I'm afraid, we've just focused on organizing our knowledge so that we can mainly reuse it, and then making sure we have kind of the standard, all the DC, all the Dublin core things so other people can reuse and harvest.
One more as well from Itlala as well, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about the ILRI description lists used to facilitate publishing across different ILRI platforms, or is it also across different health information systems?
Different which information?
Health information systems.
I don't know. With health information? No, I mean, I don't think. Which health information system would you be thinking of?
So for instance, like SLITS, which is like a traceability sort of information system used in Eswatini in Southern Africa.
No, I don't think so, no.
Oh, okay, great.
I mean, really, it's very much an ILRI-wide thing. We haven't promoted it to other people because, well, it's really just something that I don't think if you were to ask a whole bunch of data scientists to look at it, they probably would come up with a lot of holes. It's really just a kind of working list that suits our research portfolio. In a sense, it's not really, it's not the global description of livestock. As I said, it's not a livestock vocabulary, it's more an ILRI vocabulary. We like to think that the AgroVoc behind it gives us the bigger picture.
Okay.
But there's other things we can connect to. So we don't promote it from the people and say, please use our vocabulary, because other people would probably find it useless. I would imagine that OIE would have its own particular vocabulary, or other people that are FAO, even animal production people, that would be different to us.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so I don't have any claims to fantasticness from it. It's just a working tool that works for us. But who knows, it may change also in a day or so, or a month or so, or a year. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Great. So I think we'll move on to the next presentation. So we've seen one approach, and now we're going to hear about probably quite a very different approach that you're embarking on with your work, Amanda. So I'll just have to find your presentation. Are you okay to stand here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And if anyone needs water, there's now some water on the table. Okay.
So, well, in theory, I'm talking about this animal health surveillance ontology, but I would try to, I suppose I was found because of this paper on the drivers for the development. Why did we decide to develop an ontology? And the co-authors in the paper are both people from the veterinary side, like me, and a lot of computer scientists whose job is to develop ontologies. Maybe I should, this is the domain and scope, which is a lot to say. So I'm a veterinarian and I work with the governmental bodies that control disease reporting. So I I also felt a little bit of a cheater. Like I said, I'm both livestock and ontology because not really modeling livestock. The animals only come to me when they're sick. There is a whole 99% of the animal that is healthy and being used for production and being measured for different things that have to do with its production. So my background to this was, so Marie was talking about how you really go towards an ontology when you need linking. And nowadays we think linking in the sense of linking data sets, but my job was, I was trying to develop an automated system to monitor disease trends. And I was trying to group all the animal records I had in syndromes. So how many cases of respiratory disease did we have today in cattle? How many cases of reproductive disease? And to group records into respiratory, I had to make some assumptions about if the data I have is which disease they had, I have to classify this disease as respiratory. If the data I have is on this clinical symptoms, clinical signs they have, I have to make some assumptions. If the data I have is what pathology test, so I had to make a lot of assumptions. So my linking was the type that Marie showed between columns. If the column is a test for rabies, then nervous signs. But if it's actually a column about clinical signs, then maybe I need other sorts of links to what defines a nervous syndrome. And my idea is this system should be future-proof. If tomorrow we decide that this disease is not reproductive anymore, is now respiratory, or if we change the way we're classifying things, or we change the groups that we're classifying the disease on altogether, if we had gone through a data set and classified every row into a syndrome, in the future, if we change our minds, that data set's not compatible anymore. But if you create an ontology that sets links, disease A leads to syndrome B, you can in the future change the syndrome, you can change the link, it's future-proof. You just change the model, the knowledge model that sits on top of the data and let the computer do the job of refactoring the data. So I was working here where I had disease reporting, clinical data, laboratory data, and I wanted the computer to be able to make sense of this data. But what became quickly obvious is that modeling the whole structure of the animal population so that I could, for instance, detangle when I was having records that were at the animal level, at the herd level, at the slaughter batch level, it was hard. So I needed to model a whole side of the animal production and livestock that, even though I put my hand up earlier, is not really my day-to-day life. I'm working with animals that are already sick. So this is where the livestock is, and this is where I was kind of focusing. And this is from the paper. I don't expect you can read. It's just to highlight that there was a whole set of classifiers. Imagine you have an Excel list, like Marie-Angelique showed, and you have a certain number of columns that have nothing to do with the health information about the animal. It's just you need to be able to model the geographical location, if it was an animal or herd, who reported that, and things like that. And then you come the health information. And my job in the beginning was trying to map the concepts that I needed to even have in an ontology. So once you map those concepts, so clinical signs, diseases, anatomical location, this is a very top level mapping of the concepts I need. Once I understand that, okay, my ontology needs the concept of a disease, it's like having a column disease, then I need to go for how I'm going to populate the concepts here. So the question that was raised earlier about whether you're defining the variables or the content from the variables, I think if you're just going to have a list of diseases, then you might as well just have a vocabulary. And you're just going to look for vocabularies that can fill in this box. It's like this box is going to be a hierarchical list of terms of all the diseases. And that terminology, you can find some terminology for diseases and they go here. But the job of the ontology is linking to the other concepts. So I thought I would start mapping those concepts and then looking for how am I going to populate these concepts. Maybe there already exists, I mean, there definitely already exists an ontology of anatomical location. So then I just go and grab that ontology of anatomical location and plug it here. There doesn't exist an ontology of diseases, so then do I need to look for vocabularies to do this? The OIE has a list of diseases. It is an ontology, but it's a list of diseases. Do I start from the list from the OIE? And then there were 10 other people saying, but we have a better list, but we use another vocabulary. But the brilliance of ontology is that you can then start linking those things, but it takes a lot of work. So my feeling is that if I at least know, okay, there is already a group in France working on the, the list of diseases and ontology for diseases, fine, then I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to leave this box here on my ontology, and I'm going to work with something else, and I just keep in touch with them, and I know when to connect. But this mapping of what concepts I needed started bigger and bigger, and I started identifying that some ontologies were already covering it. So by the time that paper was published, ASO already didn't exist. So what happened was I got some funding to focus on the surveillance part, the disease part, but I had to include humans as well. So I dropped the animal from the equation and focused on the health information. So it became the health surveillance ontology. And the part we're discussing here, the animal part, is exactly what kind of got dropped out of the equation. That was due to my funding. So I applied for a permanent ID for those two different ontologies. I'm working on this one, and our hope is that Megan is going to be able to work on this one. So this group, I hope, can live on. This will live in the world that I hope this group will pick up. And of course, ontologies are all interoperable, so I'm working here. I really hope this will be developed within the collaboration in this group. I'm really aiming to stay interoperable with these two other ontologies, and I'm working every 2 weeks. We have meetings exactly to identify, okay, I need a concept here for X. Okay, you already have it. Teach me how to use your concept. And they focus on humans and outbreaks, and I focus on animal and regular data. So we're very complementary, and we're making sure so the way we do it, and it's a suggestion for this group, is we kind of share this. We kind of meet every 2 weeks, and we kind of share a top level. Okay, I'm working here, and then we just kind of share. Okay, then I'm gonna work here. The legacy of this paper, so the animal health ontology doesn't exist anymore, but in that paper there was a supplemental material on a table with a mapping of all the existing vocabularies I found for animal health, not for livestock. The lessons I learned was a lot of times I was get caught on modeling complexity that I thought is what I know about livestock, or I know about animals, or I know about diseases, and I was trying to put all of that in. And the ontologist kept telling me, don't anticipate complexity. What is the data set you have? What is the user case you have? So when I was, for instance, overwhelmed with the list of diseases and how many lists of diseases exist out there, I went to my data set. My data set has these 4 diseases. Okay, I'm going to use these 4 diseases based on the name they were given on the European Food Safety Agency terminology. On my ontology, I'm going to put these 4 diseases. I'm going to give them, annotate them with the unique identifier that comes from the European Food Safety terminology, so people can trace back to that terminology. If tomorrow I look at the OIE list, I'm just going to annotate that these also refers to the OIE list, whatever. But focus on the data. There is a balance to be found between being data-driven, knowing from the domain knowledge, and also when you want to stay interoperable with other ontologies. Sometimes you do have to anticipate some complexity, but you can do that by going to a top-level ontology. I'm not going to get that technical right now. And what I found also is that I wasted all the time I put just trying to put concepts on ontology without actually creating a group, a community that could keep the work going. So I think we're starting from the right place here. I just wanted to point out that on the meeting that we were, the semantic meeting, I met Monica Solanki, and she is working on some ontology for some livestock data. She wasn't picked up by this group because her work's not published yet. They're just starting. But I promised I would bring her name up, that maybe she could be included in the next rounds of this. And we discussed exactly this. How do we keep moving forward, making sure that we are coordinated? So the way I kind of see it is that if you are worried about concepts and how they link, you end up with something like this. In the panels to come, we have one about the components needed for a livestock ontology. And I think if you try to map all the components for an ontology of livestock, you'd end up with something like this. I would suggest that we don't start thinking what components we need, but each person who is annotating data starts mapping the concepts they need. And if we had a place where we, let's say a shared file where we draw our little top level diagram of the concepts we are, let's say I am the person doing this, and I put my diagram up there, and then Mega comes and put her diagram, and it's this one, then it's like, okay, we're going to meet somewhere in the future, but I can continue my work independent from her. But if I am right here, and then someone puts up their diagram, and it's this yellow one, it's like, okay, I need to contact this person, and we need to stay in touch, and we need to make sure that all those links are mapped as we move forward. While we know that this person is doing this, but we know our work only. So just by being aware of what each other is doing, I think if we could just share this top level, very high level idea of, okay, I'm working with, like yesterday I sat with Monica, and her data set was on some milk Roman parameters. It's like, I never looked at that. I have nothing to do with that. Our only link is that we both have an animal concept. So it's nice to know what each other is doing, but we don't need to work together. So my proposal would be that we have a community where Monica called this the data coverage model, where you just kind of say what concepts you're working with. Okay, we're both working with disease. It's really complex. There isn't the French group who couldn't present, and they're working on a list of diseases and traits. Okay, let's work with them. But yeah, that was my pitch. Sorry, I am 2 minutes over time. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It's really enlightening. I hear noises from the online group, so I'm imagining there are some questions.
No, just another applause.
Oh, more applause. That's not bad either. Okay, so we're going to have a little discussion now. We're a tiny bit behind, but I think it's really important to discuss what we've heard from Fernanda, and also in relation to what we've heard from Peter, because essentially we have two kind of very different approaches for very different types of problems. But it sounds to me like some of us have problems more like the kind that Peter is trying, has been working on solving, and others have some challenges much closer to what Fernanda, and there may actually be some intersections. So I just invite anyone to share their thoughts or questions or follow-ups, if you have any. Louise?
I really enjoyed both talks. Yeah, I think the idea of basically sharing what we do and having catch-ups, and this idea of having a shared area where we map out what area we're working on, work out whether it overlaps or not. And I'd be very happy to do that when I present later. I'll show 2 examples. But I think that would be brilliant, just to make sure that we don't repeat work and collaborate, really.
I think that's really strong as well. I think it's quite a daunting prospect if you're thinking, we have to start from scratch and build this whole thing, but there's so many bits and pieces of work going out there. So I'm new to this, so excuse me if I ask stupid questions. But in building this kind of big map, do you have to agree which is your kind of go-to baseline ontology, or do you first go to, I think you mentioned some European website. Is there sort of like a priority list of existing descriptions or vocabularies that you would start with, and then you go to the second order one, third order? So
I think if we take this data-driven approach, where I put up there a graph that is based on the data I have, then I who hold the data will probably know which is the best. Yeah, which is, okay, if I'm working with this type of data, I kind of know where the players in my field. And then if you come when you see that diagram, you see that you're working on something very similar, then I think we should talk about what source we're going to use. But if we're not working with anything similar, I think I just have to make decisions within my community what I'm going to take.
I think if there was an area where there was a community like that, would be very useful, because one of the things is around diseases, like what names to give, and it was interesting that you used the European Food Standards Safety. Yeah. And so if there is a community driven and that you're using that and have prior experience, then we probably follow what you did if we were having the same diseases. Yeah. It would be very helpful.
Yeah. But I think if those will emerge
when we map it out. So
when we map it out, exactly.
Who's actually who's got a map and where the concepts overlie, and actually start looking at those hotspots where people are intersecting.
Exactly.
Any other thoughts?
But I think what for me is an observation is that FAO used to have an enormous effort in this area, and it's kind of disappeared a bit. They've changed priorities. But they were kind of building like web. They were trying to build like a series of web web apps, web services, where all this stuff globally could be sort of drawn in and reused and applied. And I don't know where, I mean, so, but they had a kind of a mandate at a certain point. They were given the global mandate. Let's help the world in this area. I kind of assumed that in animal health, WOIE has a kind of a global mandate to maintain lists of diseases. And I don't know, but I don't think they're into some of the things we work on. I don't know, the more production side isn't the interest to OIE. They're really about health surveillance and those things. They don't care about markets or genetics or whatever, animal feeding and stuff like that, unless there's a disease component to it. So it's for my part of it is who is the place that convenes. Maybe GBADs will be a big thing for animal diseases, but there isn't a one for production or for other things. So you have to find a bit of niche. I mean, so ILRI has never, as I understood, ILRI has never said we are going to be the ontology, the knowledge organizer for the world. We're going to deliver solutions to smallholders, and if research and data can help, this can help that. We're interested, but ILRI isn't said we're going to keep the world ontology. FAO at one point was saying they were going to be the vocabulary center, but that's all gone, more diffused. I don't know why is whether they see themselves as the keeper of the disease. It would be nice to know whether they are the ones who keep the official names and registry of all diseases, so we can they're kind of the reference center in a sense.
I don't know if Lala wants to respond to that.
They have the wise.
Yes, hello. Yeah, thank you for your question. Well, yes, indeed, we have the OIE 117 listed diseases, which are internationally recognized. However, I mean, currently we are working on sort of expanding and making the OIE WAHIS have better features in order to better manage the data received from member states. So I don't know if that answers your questions.
But you're more or less the standard setting. I mean, but you only have notifiable diseases, right?
Yes, notifiable and also emerging diseases.
Yeah. So if I find one that isn't on your list, that's how I put it on your list.
I'm sorry, what is that?
I mean, if you find one that isn't on your list.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, maybe somebody else was more than I.
If you find a disease that isn't in our list.
Yeah.
Well, usually, how diseases are added to our list, it goes through sort of a commission. So there are certain criteria, and based on the if the disease fits the criteria, not we, but the commission decides whether to add that disease into the list or not. And that's a long process, and it goes through a thorough investigation and so forth, and it depends on multiple factors. So not only the disease, but also the whether it can grow to become, a pandemic, effect on trade, and multiple other factors, and also the diagnostic factors and so forth.
It feels like there's a lot of ontologies and vocabularies out there, but they're all for a purpose rather than being just for being an ontology or being a vocabulary. They're all built for a purpose.
That's positive. Yeah, that's good.
That means they're all limited as well, though. Like the WAHIS one only does notifiable diseases.
Yeah.
So,
but it's just a controlled vocabulary for people reporting to that system.
Mm-hmm.
So if you develop some sort of machine interpretable code, the machine just needs to know that this code is the same as the OE code, whatever, is the same as the EFSA code, whatever, is the same as, because on those places, as you say, they have a purpose there. And they are for humans who are working there. So if I create a set of machine readable codes, I just map to other things I know exist. So in a sense, I don't think we need to add anything to the list. We just need to know whatever is on our ontology.
What is on that list and what isn't on that list.
Yeah.
But you said something like, my ontology is no longer existing?
The animal health surveillance ontology is no longer existing. The animal health ontology has a place, a permanent will never die address, but there's no content there.
Mm-hmm.
The GBADs will pick it up. And the health surveillance ontology is striving.
Okay.
But then it's not modeling diseases, it's modeling organisms, so Campylobacter as opposed to Campylobacterial.
Yeah.
There's a question from Sophie online.
Is the OIE actionable?
Yes, this is a question to Itlala. Is the OE list machine actionable? I mean, can we access it through applications like web services or a Sparkle endpoint?
Yes, absolutely. So the OIE list of diseases is accessible and is available at the OIE website. And also we have the WAHIS, which is the World Animal Health Information System, through which countries submit notifications on the disease situations in their countries, and that is also made accessible online to everyone. And this is, of course, to promote transparency and to allow member states and partners to make use of the information. So yes, it's available online on the OIE website.
Okay.
But I understand it's everyone human, not everyone
Yeah.
machine.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because there was a discussion. I mean, the OIE is interested in this, and there was a discussion. I wasn't there, unfortunately, about whether we can move the WAHI system to some sort of supported by ontologies and having that kind of thing. So the OIE is thinking about it, but my understanding is that it's not machine readable yet.
Yes, so actually, we had the first codification think tank meeting in November, and Megan was with us, fortunately. So the think tank was basically to bring experts together and to discuss how to develop codes based on animal disease names, and basing that on the OIE listed starting with the OIE listed diseases. And the purpose of this is to make the OIE WAHIS interoperable with other health information systems, which is why I asked earlier about the description list of ILRI. So we had the think tank in November, and we are moving forward now in sort of developing case definitions for each of the disease names in order to facilitate the process of codification. However, yes, we're still on the way, so yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased that we're getting good participation from people who can't be here. I'm going to ask that we move on to the next session. There's a lot on the agenda. So we've heard about some of the current approaches that are underway. We are now going to hear about some of the new challenges that are coming on board, people are trying to address in terms of, initiatives that want to use standard vocabularies or ontologies to organize their data. So we're going to have 4 back-to-back, and essentially these are sort of use cases. The first one will be Georgina from Beehive, University of Surrey. She's online. Georgina, you should be able to actually operate the presentation yourself, or if not, Gareth can do it for you. But we can see it on the screen here. It looks good.
I can see it on the screen. How do I move to the next slide?
If you press
do I just click?
the right-hand button, and if that doesn't work, then Gareth can do it for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm actually from University of Surrey, but I'm part of a research group within that called VHive, and it stands for the Veterinary Health Innovation Engine, and it's a unique selling point of the University of Surrey Vet School, which is one of the newest in the country, to actually use digital innovation to benefit animal health. And the DIA project, which is the Data Innovation Hub for Animal Health, is the main project I am working on. And that is a big data hub that is intended to bring together lots of different data sets. If we could move on to the next one, please. Thank you. So this is a little bit of background about VHive, for those of you that perhaps not familiar with it. And we partner with Zoetis and also the University of Exeter Business School. And the other 2 universities are partners of our Alpha project, which is the African Livestock Productivity and Health initiative, which is a Bill Gates project. And part of that is that I will have data to go into DIA. This is the VHive vision, and this is our principal investigator, Professor Alex Cook. And this is what is driving vHive? We've existed for about 4 years now, and we're looking to be a leading global network hub. So we're constantly looking at collaboration opportunities and where we can take animal health through the use of data. This is the benefits of the Data Innovation Hub, which is that we have data expertise, and we want to get papers and reports from this and citations. And we're also looking for secure data storage repository for multiple data partners to actually be able to use. So that's very much where I come in. I'm a data scientist, but I'm moving into the area of managing more of the data governance side of the platform. We also have intention to put in data analytics tools that people can use on their own data and also on data that's already been added to the hub. So we create dashboards, and this is to make it a one-stop shop to understand different animal health sectors. So for phase 1, we've been working on poultry. Phase 2, we're continuing with poultry, but we're also bringing in some canine data. This is the proposed architecture of the finished project. Obviously, we're in the very early stages, but the intention is to have this big partnership network, a secure site, to be able to collect data, harmonise it with an overarching model, which is where I want to have the standard vocabulary, hopefully an ontology, because it can actually build on that to draw in the relationships between the different sectors within animal health, and also to have visualization of that data that is then useful to vets in the field, to policymakers, potentially to farmers. So that is very much what we're doing. This is the poultry use case that we were working on. This is the vision of where we can go with it. This is not where we are currently, but we want to be able to bring together data sets from sensors, from farm data, from veterinary surveillance, open access data, genetic data, production data, historical sets on pharmaceuticals and efficacy, and actually bring these together, harmonise them, allow the user to actually work with them and visualise them into a report that then goes into a publication. At the moment, we're looking at vaccine efficacy. This is the benefit of membership of the hub, as we see it, that we can do validation of technology from small and medium enterprise businesses, look at new business models. The animal health sector is a little bit risk averse in the data side, so it's leading the way of what can be possible, and also training our students to think about digital innovation and to maximize the benefits of the technology that's being developed. This is the process that I've been involved with as data scientist. Scientists have provided about 9 years worth of data for avian infectious bronchitis. So for phase 1, I went through this 10-step process to actually work out what that data meant. And that's where my background in information management has come in. That I immediately want to understand what the metadata for those files is, what the different variables mean, which is where I've consulted with subject experts, and to try and clean that data. So as you said, you have multiple data values within a field. So it's going to great lengths to try and clean that up so we can actually visualize it. For instance, there was quite a small omission on the data collection form where the age of sampling didn't have a set of units. So I had all kinds of different units and ways of writing it, and that gets quite labour intensive to try and sort that out. We're using a lot of lookup tables that I've built, and also working with the software vendor that is contracted to Zoetis to actually build the hub, to try and get a proof of concept, which we presented back in September. So I'll move on. This is a bit of detail about the data I actually have, which is quite an unusual data set, that it is 9 years worth of molecular typing data. And also we had a data set for seroprevalence. And within those data sets, we had vaccine use data down to the farm level for the first and second vaccination. And then I was working with those to work out what vaccination strains were contained within them, because our initial use case was to look at vaccine stocks and which countries effectively Zoetis needed to send their vaccines to. So we've placed that on maps. And the idea is to help them to know what is going to come up where in the field of infectious bronchitis, and actually help them to stock within those countries. Although as I'm a non-vet, so coming up with a definition of what is an outbreak is quite a challenge. And also coming up with a reason why people would actually want to share longitudinal data with us is another challenge. There needs to be an incentive for that, to get this farm and veterinary practice data, and also disease surveillance. So that's an ambition for the project over the next 1 to 3 years, is to actually bring in regular surveillance data. Additional data, as I mentioned, we've got some canine antiparasitics, and that's practice data. We also have data for Gumboro, Newcastle and E. coli. But for the moment, I've focused on the larger data set, which is infectious bronchitis. Gone through the reasons why I actually want standard terms, and I'm actually working with software developer and data scientist in Greece. It's another office in Brussels, and the VHive team itself are working in Nigeria, Uganda, so it's quite, everyone has quite a different background, and it's good to actually work with those experts and also look at OIE to work out what the standard term would be, because there's some confusion. If I refer to it as IB, that could be infectious bursal disease. If I refer to AI, it could be artificial insemination, not artificial intelligence. It's just getting over those overuse of acronyms and trying to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. It's too easy to think that we are talking about the same thing. And also with the dashboards, because I am a non-vet and so is the data scientist building them, to actually label those charts correctly when we're talking about positive lab results for a strain, or when we're talking about a strain that's been given as a vaccine, and looking at the difference. Also, going forwards, I want to be able to tag content in this platform, and the vision is to have a knowledge base in there, so I would need to tag content. And also, early on in 2020, end of January, February time, I want to use catalogue records in CCAN, which is an open source data catalogue that will be built into the hub, and we will then use to make the data sets within it findable. So part of the work I've done with the data sets is to actually add a tab to the spreadsheet and fill in a starting point of the catalogue record. But I think after the presentations this morning, I think going back to the Dublin core fields would be a good thing to do at this early stage. Also, need standard terms for actual data governance and data sharing agreements. I think it's important to be clear about which data sets and what they can be used for. So I'm going to need to standardize that. The steps I've taken so far, as I said, it's early days, but there's creation of metadata records, naming and describing all of the column headings and what they contain and which data set they're in, combining that into one spreadsheet, which for the moment I'm using to list the data visualizations that we want to appear, But going forwards, that's very helpful in terms of creating a bit of a taxonomy that we can use to tag those terms. Also to look at the data cleaning and make sure I've been consistent, and to review it with the subject experts, which I've got contact with about 5 different experts within poultry, which has been very helpful for explaining things that as a non-vet aren't immediately obvious. And I've been reviewing the lookup tables I created with them. Thesaurus development I have experience of working with controlled vocabularies, thesauri and ontologies. So I've started looking at the terms from the data sets that we already had, and then I've revisited that with the IBV data set that we have, and just trying to put those into a hierarchy, work out what the main topic of the ontology is, which I think is animal health and all the different species, and then bringing into it the sample types, the dating, the years, the labs that are analysing them, the diseases, and just put that into one model, which is my aim at the moment. And that's where I would like to know what I could actually do with pre-published ontologies, because this is a system that we will want to link up to others, so it needs to be interoperable. So I was interested to have a look at the different ontologies there. So I've got those from Google, but I know there's more information amongst the group, and looking at API connections to those perhaps. This is me trying to map out the different poultry species I've got based on the data sets and the lookup tables I've got. So just trying to get a logical structure, some standard terms, which I've got at the moment as plural. I would expect a search system to be able to make the singular version map to it, but I've written them in anyway. And also having some related terms to other parts of this particular data model. So I would be able to map, say, wild birds into wildlife, for example, and also be able to match these to particular poultry rearing, perhaps, whether it's commercial or non-commercial. So these are my thoughts so far. There is more, but I've just put that in because it's quite small print. This is my standard list of variables per dataset, which is very small, but basically each one of these columns is a dataset for a time period. And I've just been able to look at what standard column names are in that. This is quite easy at this point because the datasets are from pretty much the same source. But going forwards, I want to be able to match these onto other datasets from other sources. And then finally, this is my line manager and strategy manager for VHive, that if anyone's interested in finding out a bit more about the hub or has any ideas for use cases we might want to do, that is the contact details, or get in touch with me. So thank you very much. Has anyone got any questions?
Thanks, Georgina. So we'll have just 1 or 2 clarification questions,
Okay.
and then we can move on and then hear from a few others. So any clarification questions?
So one question I have: will the project result in a poultry diseases ontology or something that other people can use? Will that be a freely available good?
I would hope so. It would be more than just poultry as well.
Yeah,
We're picking up different
example you were
sectors.
showing, yeah.
Yes, at the moment I've been heavily focused on poultry, but the intention is to map animal health. And as a professional, I would like to have something come out of this that would be available to others, or that used other sources and could be linked to them. Because the whole purpose of this is to promote and gain insight from sharing data. So it would make no sense not to do that.
Great, thanks. All right, so I think we're going to move on. I am aware that we're running a bit behind. We'll have to find ways to catch up, but I encourage all of you who are presenting to make sure you stick to the main points as much as possible. So Louise, if you come up, please. I'm just going to bring up your presentation here.
So I'm going to present today 2 use cases, and it's been already hugely valuable hearing the discussion, because one of the things was this question about where to start, vocabulary ontology, and who else is working in this area, and can we learn from others, but then also provide input and a test ground for some of the work we're doing. The first use case is...
You'll have to
oh, do I have to do it? Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I didn't realise it. So to set a bit of background, I work for SEBI. We are a Bill and Melinda Gates funded project, and one of our deliverables is around there's a community of practice, livestock data for decision, where we bring together other Gates funded grants working with livestock. But also, one of the asks from the foundation has been to collate other livestock grants data, and we're currently working with 11 grants across animal health and animal production to start to give them a system where they can actually understand the impact on what's been delivered across their livestock portfolio. Basically, money's been spent, where's the money gone, what's been delivered, where's the impact, what's the story. And this is across multiple investments. And so what we've worked with the foundation, and they've defined some KPIs, key performance indicators, that they would like us to look at. And this covers things like, so we are working with some pharmaceutical firms or NGOs on actually vaccine sales delivery, animal health products. So we are looking at, in a given country, in a given year, how many animal health products were distributed. They're also looking at, for example, artificial insemination. There's some grants operating in countries delivering AI. And then there's another area of grants that are actually looking at delivering day-old chicks. The whole purpose is to increase the production and then ultimately the livelihoods of smallholder farmers. So the ask from the foundation is that we bring together this data and then present back interactive dashboards where you can look by country and by year what's been delivered, what sort of impact it's had, and eventually Gareth's actually been doing some modelling around economic benefit.
You have to take this.
Oh, sorry, I keep doing that. So really the first question for me was, at a very starting point, where do I go to get a list of standard terms? I'm a biologist, but I worked for over 10 years on sort of financial systems. I retrained and became a software developer and worked on a lot of sort of data integration systems where payments transfer between banks. So I never really had to think about this. It was a standard interface, XML messages, I'd write the code, the messages went out, they came back in, interfaces. Here, so my natural reaction is we're taking data from different groups that have been collected in different ways. Sometimes it's an Excel spreadsheet, maybe socioeconomic data. Sometimes it's information that's been collected through mobile apps or ODK. Sometimes it's some of these sort of more like Sage or SAP sort of systems to manage sales. They're coming in Excel spreadsheets. And so, for example, the animal health, different people are calling diseases different things. So again, there's assumptions and sometimes we check, but Newcastle disease is at ND, sometimes it's written out. So I'm sort of going through. Now, I've been working quite closely with Dora and now soon Isla, and Dora's a vet. So she has a spreadsheet for me that I think she got from OIE, didn't you?
Yeah.
So I was saying, what terms should I use? So that's what we've done so far. And so we've tried to sort of start thinking about how we harmonise the disease names, but really I was looking at this group just to say, what should I call the things? The other thing is I was very interested about the discussion a bit more about whether, as a first step, just a list of terms, but then moving a little bit more into the richness. So one thing would be nice later down the line is, okay, these diseases, but perhaps a bit more syndromes, like the animal health products that have been distributed is there a sort of a coalition around respiratory diseases or nutrition? That could be quite an interesting thing, and then even look between countries. So it could give us a lot more richness to our analysis later down the line and a lot more value. So pretty much all this data, we've got data from 11 grantees. I write code, I harmonise it. So we've got the animal health. There's also the products, like how should those products be classed, because it's vaccines, and we were looking, yes, I mean, there's things like kits, wormers, you know, Dora's actually just starting to help me do this as a vet, but you know, what's the terminology we should use to start managing this data? We've also got production, animal production, and I was interested, I think Peter mentioned about breeds at ILRI, so we're working with ILRI as well on the Africa Dairy Genetic Gains Project, and Judy came over to spend a week with us, but you know, there's Holstein Friesian or Jersey, or what are the terms that we could actually just say, okay, these are the terms that we should use in our data. Structures, so far, I'm standardising the data to particular structures and where possible across the whole portfolio, but even that it would be useful. I mean, I know there's something called, I think it's SIVA, where pharmaceutical firms lodge their animal vaccine sales, but I think the structure is quite simple, I haven't even been able to get access to it. So really, it's this idea of where to start, and probably the first thing is even just like a list of diseases. One thing I'd be very happy to do is map out a bit what our domain is and share it in a common repository, and then start understanding who we should be speaking to. I think that would be great. So that's our first use case. The second use case is Gareth's leading a piece of work around livestockdata.org. It's a website we're building to support our community. We have different Gates grantees in our community, and it's just really to sort of coalesce, aggregate all the sort of information within livestock to support that community. One of the things we're really keen to do is, though, hold probably as little data as possible, but very much link out to other people's portals, and sort of, it's a signposting system. So as an example, we are working with the CG and Guardian platform. I think we've been in touch with the developers.
Yeah.
So any, you know, we've been listening to different initiatives, and if people do have dashboards that they have on their site, we can signpost there and say, this is the place to go for X, Y, or Z. We do, through some of the work that we've done on this monitoring, have some data that we've collated from the public domain. And so we've created some visualizations, and they will be on livestockdata.org. But we want to know what are the terms that we should use to tag that content. So Marie's presentation was very useful, this idea about banana. We want to make sure that when we tag it with one term, all the other synonyms are found. So that's really our second use case, and I'll just go on. This first one is some work that we've done on a systematic map, or Dora did the work, the systematic map of research livestock disease in Ethiopia. It's a visualization where each line is a particular publication and it's a percentage prevalence for a given disease. You can also filter on diagnostic tests, and you went to OIE for the diagnostic test names as well. So I think we've just been we're really looking to see where should we go for the terms that other people got, you know, mapped it out a lot better, and we'll, you know, happily use it. But likewise, if there's areas that we're working in that other people aren't, then, you know, we can flag that. Maybe you need to put a bit more effort there. So these are the keywords. These were the words that we used in the paper to tag it. So that's what it was described as. But what would be nice is to know, are these part of a vocabulary? I don't know if we've checked yet. I mean, that's probably the first task, to see if these already exist somewhere else and just see if they are sort of defined. How did you come up with those? Do you remember?
Just my opinion. Yeah.
Just your opinion. Yeah. So we didn't even. Yeah. So that's the first thing, having a sort of a body where we can actually tag our content. And just another example. This is so PBS was one Performance of Veterinary Services. It's developed by OIE. It's actually an indicator that the foundation were interested in for animal health, so we've collated data on that. And in fact, Alep was his master's project doing basically text sort of analytics to actually automate the extraction of the numbers. But we've produced a visualization. It's sort of, again, where would we go to get the content? We'll have to come up with some terms that we want to tag it with, but this is around performance of veterinary services in a country, so it's covering things like how many vets have you got in the country, what's it sort of like food safety, there's lots of different things, so I suppose we just need to think about how we would tag that so people could find it. And that's it really. So really the two areas is, one, very much that we're collating data from different grants, and as a first step, what terms, and then potentially what other richness we could get if we did look at ontologies. And then the second thing is content, just making sure that we tag the content so people can find it.
any immediate questions for clarification or ideas that jump out that people might want to share?
Sorry, I know we're running late, but if I can just say this, because I thought about it many times when you brought it up. So for lists of diseases, we've mentioned some terminologies like DOE or the group who couldn't present. So I don't want to speak for them because they're not here, but they all, Ando, they three are listed as ontologies, but they have no properties. So they effectively are a terminology.
Right.
But they have like lists of diseases. Last time I talked to them, there was, maybe Sophie can say, one list was only in French, and another one, when I looked, the files weren't there, and they said they were tracking down the person who had the files and they're going to upload it on AgroPort or something. So I don't know what is this stage.
I'd be really keen on that because that work that I presented with the systematic maps that Dora's done, we're working with the School of Informatics, and they're actually trying to automate it through sort of basically natural language processing. But one of the things was we've got a load of keywords to search literature, but we were talking about trying to translate them into French because we want to look at literature. So that would be another value for us to have the translation. So I'd love to find out what the disease names are in French for these.
But
I mean, I don't want to translate.
But AgroVoc was a multilingual.
So I think I think that multilingual.
X languages, how many?
Yeah. So as list of diseases, I don't know what they have, what language they have, and also it's like if you're going to use them as a base, then when you want to link to other things, someone who has access to their ontology has to do it, and I don't know if they're active or they have plans to stay active or if the project has finished. So if that can't be live, then you're almost better starting a new list that maps to them, but that would really be a shame because I mean the whole job is not to duplicate it.
I think that's,
So it's good to see where they are as a starting point, and then there are several terminologies that you can tap into. For the production data you were mentioning, like for the KPIs, so the ICAR, this coding for disease for animal production. When I started looking into this, I wasn't able to tap into all the knowledge they have in their terminologies because, as I said, I wasn't even getting to modeling the healthy animal yet. I was modeling the sick animal. But they have a lot of terminologies, and I mean, they have a lot in this, how do you call ICAR? I don't remember what it is.
People have told me to look at ICAR. I haven't yet, but I think that's worth following up.
The one thing I will say about them is that when I first came up with this idea, we need an ontology of animal health disease, they sent a person right away, and they were there in the meeting, sitting. I had a meeting in a conference for people who were at the conference. They flew someone in just to attend that meeting, so they're interested. And even if they're not an ontology, if they are a terminology, I don't know what state they are with making it machine readable or making, endpoints or APIs that you can query their data, but they're so reachable that I think it would be a shame not to include them. So when we had this question before if we're going to map what's needed for livestock ontology, where we should we all refer to the same thing, I would say there are key things like AgroVoc, ICAR, OIE that you first consider those. Don't have to model everything that is in there. I think you model what's in your data. But if your data has a list of diseases, I think those are the key resources you have to look first and only model what they don't already have and bring that knowledge in. Those were my kind of go-to would be ICAR, AgroVoc, something like the OIE or.
So I just listened to it. It occurs to me that it'd be very, very useful if we had some sort of communication or guidance document that says just what you said, it's really, really helpful, I'm sure, for people coming into this to know ICAR, AgroVoc, OIE should be your first point of call and then next. So some sort of a guidance document, I think, for the community and people who may need to tap into this would be really helpful in my view.
One idea is also if we're making this kind of top graph of, and I don't mean by any means that this would be a knowledge model, or it doesn't mean my ontology has this concept, it means my data has this concept, I'm trying to figure them out. Then you can kind of list, the terminologies you're considering so that people can.
That's really helpful, thank you.
It's pretty much, we've got actions now, so that's great. The person you mentioned to start with for the animal health, I didn't catch.
So the ones who couldn't present today, they are in the list.
Inra.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So we'll. Sorry, I had to pause that one. we're going to get Megan presenting on GBAS. You'll run your own presentation.
So good morning, everyone. As you can see, the global burden of animal diseases is like quite a global project, and we've got lots of people involved. I won't name everyone because it would take me all the time, but just to sort of demonstrate that this is something that's been growing over time. So I'll go through it fairly quickly because I've got quite a few slides, so some of them I've put in there for the slide stack for you all to have a look at, but probably won't talk to all of them. So for the global burden of animal disease, I just wanted to go through, why we need it. So what is the problem? What GBAS is, so what's the solution, and then what's going to be going on in the future, so the legacy of GBAS. What is the problem? Animals are not the problem, but we just have a lot of them. And I wanted just to demonstrate that we've got lots of different types of animals in the world. So we've got growing animal companion animals. In Australia, we have more than 24 million pets, and in the US, close to 260 million pets. And that's something that we're not covering in the global burden of animal diseases at the moment, but certainly understanding that this is that has a big footprint or paw print. Globally, we have about 33 billion livestock, and that's just coming from FAO stat data. So, we all understand that that's, kind of a best guess, but, we've got, we can do better. I think that's the thing. So with all the collective knowledge of people mapping animals, recording animals, if we can pull that together in a much more standardized way, then we would be able to have a better picture of what livestock are where and what are they producing. And then this little bit here is kind of the sad fact that we've got going on in our wild population. Over the last 40 years, we've lost more than 40% of our land vertebrates, over 80% of our amphibians, and about 40% of our water species. And so this little guy here is a deer eating our vegetables. So we're hoping we're doing a bit to push those numbers back up again. So this is the problem that we have. Okay, so this is merely just a list of some of the trade diseases, but as you can see here, these are all kind of what we would call infectious diseases. They're related to a pathogen, and even there we can see that it's really hard to kind of map it all out. What do we call as endemic? Because in some countries you'll have a trade disease that's endemic. So for every country, this will sort of play out in a different way. So we have many species of animals. We have multiple production systems for each of our different types of animals, and we have many diseases, and so we have this really neat complexity. The other thing that we have here is people have always talked about livestock's long shadow, but actually it's for every person we have a whole bunch of animals that are supporting us. So really it's the human's long shadow of animals behind us here. So for every person is equivalent to about 0.38 livestock units, which is 190 kilos of animal. So Jonathan, this is his slide. I don't know if anyone's, well, I think most of you have met Jonathan, but he says, oh, it's about 2 of me, and so just to demonstrate, it's actually us that's making that shadow. So the solution, and our approach is basically a fundamental drive for the global burden of animal diseases is to turn complexity into clarity. So you can see that I was sort of just going through one part of complexity for the infectious diseases. What do we actually call it? So this came up a little bit with the OIE in the meeting a couple of weeks ago. What is a disease and what is an infectious organism? And of course, that particular disease in a different livestock production system will have a completely different effect and impact. So we will establish a system that regularly collects and validates and analyzes and then disseminates that information. And we're merely looking at this point at the economic impact of animal diseases, so turning it into a dollar amount. So what is the actual production loss? We talk about the production loss envelope, what we're spending on trying to keep that disease out or keep it under control, what effect it's having on trade. So there's sort of our three big loss components. And then, because of course we do need a denominator, we're looking at the value of the livestock as our denominator. And we're planning to use the lessons from the global burden of diseases in people. They've been doing this for a long time. Obviously, it's gone through quite a few iterations, and certainly that we can learn a lot from them, but also understanding that the animals are fundamentally different, or livestock's fundamentally different from humans. We'll build on and add to existing databases, so that the whole point of GBAS is not to go out and collect more data. We want to be able to use what's there, pull it together, and integrate it in a meaningful way. And so I've sort of discussed a little bit what that loss is, but I just wanted to sort of show how this is schemas just to sort of see where that data is coming from. So we of course have our OAE WAHIS here, which will feed into GBADS. We also need population databases to bring in population information. Prices, of course, is a really important component of this. We'll be able to get information from academic journals if we can annotate published research and use machine learning just to pull out as much information as we need. And I think this is really where the strength of an ontology will come in. Of course, there are some private sector databases out there, and I'd never really considered about the complexity of. So it was discussions during the week, and then today, where people have got access to data sets, but they're not standardized. I had some concept that Zoetis data would be standardized, but clearly not. So it's an interesting thing that actually this bit as well, we need some sort of ontology.
I guess what's been interesting for this is that you're working with some of them are quite big firms, so they obviously have their system to capture data. We're only getting a little bit of it. There is a CVERS, maybe it's standardized for this particular system, I don't know, but from what I've seen, the data.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is when you lodge disease names for vaccines, I don't know whether they just have their own in-house decisions, or I mean, it's something that maybe our next LD4D we could discuss.
Yeah.
And that perhaps there is a bit more. I just don't know. It's just from what I've seen, I've been having to try and work out what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to the individual group or person that's doing that research, and we see it a lot. We're using it's at the moment just companion animals, but we're getting data from electronic health records, and it seems we think, oh, this is really easy. We'll just type in a vaccine name. Every single vet clinic has created their own little code for that.
So I'm new to livestock per se, so I don't know what it's like, but from what I've seen, it's like that. So again, it's quite interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think
that's chime into that. For diet, I've been working with great long lists, thousands of ways of writing vaccine names, and that's just for one disease.
Well, I think this mapping exercise will be quite helpful, because it's only something that we've really started thinking about how we thought about the disease, but even then the products as well. So if there are people that are thinking about how we manage this, that'd be pretty good to collaborate.
I wonder if there's any use to sharing the lookup table. So I can't share the actual data, but whether I could share those tables. There's just so many different terms in it.
That would be, I mean, that would be great. I mean, I think this is the idea. Probably some of the next steps will be to us to start working out about what, that initial high-level map of what rough areas people are working in, and then perhaps those areas where there's similarity, sharing a bit more like how we're managing stuff.
Yeah. On the one hand, I'm researching the data sheets for the vaccines to find out what strains are in them, and then at the opposite end of the task, I'm looking at 9 years worth of multiple ways of saying which vaccine. Several in the same field.
Sounds like a nice job.
When you're
trying, it's what I plan to do this afternoon, but I've been saying that for days.
When you're trying to map what goes into the data. I mean, I was working with like data in Swedish. I was like, oh, this is hard because it's all in Swedish. But then the next lab in Swedish, had other ways, and then people have free text. And so the job of, even if you figure out, I'm going to just have a list of 10 diseases, those 10 diseases could be written in 100 different ways only in your institution. But
absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't mean that if we identify the big concepts, we've solved the problem of populating them, but at least we get to know who is working on the exact same problem. So that we like that.
I've got data that comes from multiple countries, mostly in Europe, and so I have terms in French, Dutch, German, sometimes something else, sometimes some shorthand. It's quite interesting. So I've been quite lucky to be able to have access to a poultry expert within the university that has actually been on the other side and filled in those forms. So even she's been baffled asking her German colleagues, what does this mean? It's quite funny. I'm sorry, but back in a minute.
I'm just sorry, I'm right out of time, but I just wanted to quickly sort of show for GBADs at least, you know, what kind of data types that we need, and you know how they were going to put together. So of course we need our different types of animals, what production systems they're in, and then we have this what we call the utopia or the production loss envelope, which is what production level we have at the moment and what is feasible, and that's what we're missing. And then, of course, populating that, is it caused by infectious disease, endemic disease, and of course, coming from Australia, you know, we've lost over 500,000 livestock just in one flood. So, you know, that's so important, that bit there. And now we're having droughts and fires. So, you know, certainly we always think, well, I always think infectious disease coming from a veterinary perspective, but there's this whole production area here that we just need to keep in mind. And so, you know, certainly in terms of ontology, we've got quite a few different concepts and domains that we need to pull together. So just the final one, I just wanted to say this is kind of where we're all coming from. So that's our sort of network. At the moment, we've got, I think, 62 people listed on the website. But, you know, of course, this is global, so it's everyone. So you certainly want everyone to contribute. And then just to remind you that we've got to live within our planetary boundaries, and I think that's why we're all here. It's about making sure that we can measure to improve, and we have healthier animals, happier people, and living within those planetary boundaries. Thank you. Sorry, I went over.
It's reminded of the big picture when we're sort of so focused on data, pieces of data, and all of that. It's really valuable. Okay, we'll continue through. There was some good discussion that happened throughout. So
what's interesting there was that's just to measure the burden. That's not to do anything about it. That's just measuring it.
Yeah. So yeah.
It's not measuring performance or impact or result. It's just this is the scale of the burden, or the size of the burden, right?
In terms of impact, we are measuring that.
Yeah, but you're not going to recommend how to reduce the burden.
No, well, yes, that's things.
This is just measuring it.
Yeah. Measuring it to say, here's where we need to allocate our resources. Yeah. And that's yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't tell you which vaccine to use in Tanzania for your sick cat.
No, but hopefully that's what people can use the data for.
Yeah. Scientists can do.
Yeah.
So I just say it's a piece. It's massive. Yeah. It's a piece of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So to break a bit from the livestock talk, I'll talk about fish. And maybe some of you are not aware of wellfish, so maybe I'll just do a very brief introduction of wellfish. It's one of the CGIAR centers that deals in aquaculture and fisheries. And our goal is to reduce poverty and hunger by improving fisheries and aquaculture. So wellfish has essentially 3 research programs, and we have sustainable aquaculture, resilient small-scale fisheries, value chains, and nutrition. And we have 3 cross-cutting themes, which are climate change, gender, and entrepreneurship. So our research is mostly in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. And the countries in pink are Egypt, Nigeria, Tanzania, Myanmar, Cambodia, Solomon Islands. These are our focal countries, while Kenya, Ghana, India, Timor-Leste, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. Those are our scaling countries, meaning we have 1 or 2 projects there. Okay, so just to mention a bit about our data streams. So we have social economic data, fish disease data, genetics, nutrition, fish breeding, catch data, fish health, and geospatial data. And this is where I'm interested to see ways in which you can collaborate with the livestock team, because there are some overlaps in terms of the data that we collect. One of the reasons why we are very interested with ontologies and vocabularies is because we have an open access and open data policy that stipulates that all our data should be in the public domain. But we want to go beyond just making the data open. We want to go a step further and make our data usable and fair. So this is why we are very keen on having ontologies and vocabularies. So as I mentioned, like we've done a very good job in trying to make our data findable, accessible, reusable, but we tend to go missing in the interoperable phase. We do not have fair vocabularies defined in our data sets, and we want to like help build an ontology so that we can apply that in our data sets. So because of that, beginning of this year, we started a fish ontology working group, and this was with the help of the CJR ontology community of practice. And one of the key things we've been doing, we've been trying to make use of existing vocabularies and ontologies within the fish environment. And then we are trying to address inconsistent use of terms. And I'm going to show you an example in the next slide. And by doing this, we want to highlight gaps and see how we can feed into that agenda. And then we want to connect and collaborate on common interests. And during the big data convention, we were able to interact with the livestock data community of practice and see how we can collaborate more. So we've taken a few steps since beginning of this year to try and build that community of practice. And one of the things that has really helped is having discussions with Marie Angelique and Elizabeth. We organized a webinar in which they demystified what ontology is, because in my organization, we do not mention the O word at all. It's like such a very evil word. So yeah, having that webinar and having people like really learn exactly what ontology is and how it can benefit has really helped in bringing people on board. So the key other step we did was establish a lead center, and this is what is working for us. As a center that does research in aquaculture and fisheries, it was a bit evident that would be the leader. We identified an ontology curator and data manager. We do not have an ontology expert on board, but we have a data manager who gets support from the ontology COP in terms of dealing with ontology work and choose our objectives. So one of the things that we really needed to do, as you saw, we have research from aquaculture to small-scale fisheries. So just having an objective, what domains do we want to focus on? Because fish is very wide. So deciding on which domains we want to focus on. So we decided on aquaculture and small-scale fisheries. So that those are our big domains that we need to work on. And then we wanted to check on what ontology and vocabularies are available both in-house and outside. And then work with domain experts to validate our concept. We are yet to do that, but we are still, it's work in progress. I mean, we just started this year, so it's something that we intend to continue with. And then check data sets and annotate them. So that's something that we've actually been doing, and I'm going to show you an example of what we've done this year. Just looking at what data sets we have, which variables we can link to a vocabulary, and now once we do that, annotate it, make it better, and then work with the ontology COP to submit to their repositories. So this is closely related to number 6. Once we have a look at our data sets and link them, we want to see what is missing and how we can and what we can do to like fill in the missing gaps. So this is an example of the work we've been doing at repository level. So this is our data repository Dataverse, and this is our publication repository DSpace. So for Dataverse at repository level, we make sure we annotate our keywords with a vocabulary. And you can see we're using AgroVoc for the time being for keyword mapping. And then as you can see for this space, we also use AgroVoc. For the dataset level, that's where it gets a bit more complicated. And this is an example of what we've been trying to do. So we just list a variable and try to link it to a controlled vocabulary. So we use OBO library, and we also use AgroVoc as well. So this is just an example of what we've been trying to do so far. So what are our next steps in terms of growing the fish ontology working group? We want to engage more with other institutions. And for me, this serves as a very good space in which we can see where we can collaborate with the livestock people, because all in all, it's animals. And then, grow the ontology group beyond wild fish. You want to engage people because we know there are very many other people who are working with fish data. And then we need to agree on annotation standards. And this is came up from a discussion we had with Marie-Angelique. Like in terms of annotating our data sets, agree if it's chemicals, are we going to only focus on the chemical ontology? If it's a nutrition data, like if it's nutrition terms, are we just let's focus on AgroVoc? Like just have a way of standardizing our annotation in the organization. And then develop guidelines on setting up an ontology. For us, it's been quite difficult because we don't have any guidelines that we could refer to. So anyway, moving forward, we want to have these guidelines so that people who are interested in setting up an ontology can have that. And the last one is bringing domain experts in the working group, which is very key for us because at the moment we're very short-staffed when it comes to ontologies. And that's it in terms of how wild fish and fish we're trying to deal with this monster of a word. Yeah.
Thank you. Any thoughts for Jackie?
For a change, I'll speak. The person who convinced me that what I needed to solve my problem was an ontology is a computer scientist with great experience in agriculture. So if you asked the group, it's like I think there is the only person who would put his hand up for I know aquaculture and I'm an ontology expert. So as we kind of map our areas of expertise, and I agree with you that I think people are either really experts in ontologies and they're building ontologies and they kind of talk to other ontologists, or they're domain experts struggling to do it. And I also haven't been able to find good guidelines on how do you do this. If you're a domain expert who needs an ontology, you haven't found it, you're going to start putting something together. How do you do it? Where do you do it? On the website, that wasn't the end of my presentation, I put some videos that were kind of me trying to convince the people in my group that we needed an ontology. So it was like these domain expert guidelines to why do you need an ontology, and it was like 2 videos that I put there. So I've been having the luck of being supported by a strong research group in ontologies in Sweden. So I would be happy to stay in touch with you so that can see how maybe they can help.
That's true. Great. That's great connections.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I want to just revisit the agenda. Obviously, we're running late. We were originally going to have a presentation from Marie-Angelique talking through essentially the steps that the crop community has been taking on developing a crop ontology under the CGIAR big data platform. Marie-Angelique says that she's already mentioned quite a few of the points, and we really don't want to waste the opportunity to have some practical kind of hands-on discussions. So I wonder if we can reconfigure the rest of, the next hour and a little bit, and also keeping in mind that Fernanda has to leave in half an hour, to jump straight into the hands-on session, kind of maybe with Marie-Angelique as a bit of a resource person, and we can have her presentation up on the screen, or she can bring it up on a laptop to talk through, steps. But I would really like to maybe decide as a group how we want to proceed. So the suggestion that came in before the workshop is that we have some hands-on sessions. There were 2 ideas. One would be mapping out what components are needed in a livestock ontology, and one was actually working through a data set. So someone had a data set ready. I know someone, maybe Dora might have brought something, potentially that we could work through to understand the variables that are collected and how they might be defined. Can we just have a little discussion to decide how we want to make the most of the expertise and the time in the room, and who might be willing to be a bit of a resource person, who might be willing to subject themselves to a bit of scrutiny. Thoughts?
I think the first one, perhaps a bit more about how to go about mapping it would be helpful, rather than perhaps, like we've got a systematic map data set, but it's quite specific. I suppose we haven't prepared either too much, so I was just wondering. We have a data set, but it's sort of basically some diseases, it's based journal article. I don't know whether we could share that with people who are interested later. So I think more from our perspective, I guess it's trying to understand, like make sure that when we leave here, we've got the next steps and we know what would be valuable for other people.
Yeah, and I think we'll get to that. I think what we're trying to figure out now is we've got some experts in the room, the people who voted in category 3 who were like, I know livestock, I know ontologies, or people who said, I know ontologies. How can we, tap that knowledge and expertise and experience that's currently here right now and actually work through a bit of, roll up our sleeves and work through some of the real questions that we have. So I know that Sebi has some questions. You probably have some questions, Jackie. Maybe not. I know that you probably have quite a lot of questions. So I don't know if we want to maybe split into, say, 2 groups and then have a resource person with each group or more. Can I ask a question, please?
Would this mapping also be mapping the people who are sat around the table against their kind of areas of interest that they would be in? Because I think that would be really valuable. If we had a matrix which said across the top, GBAD, blah, 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 and then on the other matrix, animal health and species and that type of thing.
I think that would be really helpful, because I was looking at your slide, Megan, and thinking, oh yeah, we've got some of that, and then I had Georgina talk as well, so that would be helpful just to understand.
So we don't really know where everyone kind of fits together.
Yeah, I mean, right now we have kind of a flat overview of sort of who's doing what, but it's not interoperable.
Yeah,
I think we need to move forward, which help us.
Yeah, and we did that also in the crop community, or even like the CGIAR ontology community of practice, by having like this LinkedIn group also, where the people of the community, then you can really see their background, and also it helps to find like the right skills that you need to your own issue, so that's also something like really organizing a community that is really a community. That was in my presentation. That's really like the key point, and I think so. And trying to find like ways to have like the community interacting easily.
So is that something that would be a good use of our time now, is literally just going around and sort of figuring out who has something to contribute, or who has a specific expertise? Or
I mean, there was another thing when I was speaking to Fernando, this idea of whether you're a consumer or a producer as well, I suppose, because I can't imagine necessarily that we're going to it'd be helpful just to know that who are sort of the people that are sort of very much sort of producing the sort of standards of the ontologies, and then who might want to consume it.
Yeah, right.
And then understanding where there's gaps as well. But I think also take advice from Marie that obviously with crops and ontology, my understanding is probably being a bit more active. So what advice you give to us that we maximise having all these people together and make them listed?
For now. Yeah, I mean, just like, I think it would be a good way to start, like having this, the domain of expertise of everyone, and then, try to specialize that in more specific key concepts. First,
okay. Yeah, because even if we can, who is really dealing with livestock, who is dealing with diseases, who is, taking data sets, who is annotating data, I think if we leave here today knowing who we're gonna call, because I don't know how much we could actually get, like, the idea of hands-on session is really nice, but I don't know how much we can actually get work done today. It's more knowing who we're going to, and also I would really like, I'm sorry I'm leaving here, and I don't want in any way to disturb the dynamic. I can leave and then people could, but I would really like to understand the role of SABI moving forward, or of this group, because if we're going to identify who is going to communicate with whom, but what this overarching group, you know, this community, or what is the goal? Is it to maintain the resources online where we go and we find each other, but then, like, you know, every quarter having an online meeting? Or I don't know what, it will be interesting to understand the role.
Just to mirror that point from comments online, if kind of Elizabeth was saying, it would be good to understand what individuals are doing, like what stepwise processes individuals are taking individually, and then like what we can do as a group as well. So mirrors what we've said.
Okay, so no, please stay. Well, if you want to, but it's all fine.
But I think we should maybe get away from that. I mean, I don't believe we can have livestock ontology, but I would like to have Marie-Angelique say, what is the purpose of an ontology for livestock? And we could work towards actions to say, right, we need, what would you say the primary value proposition for an ontology is? Why do we need one? What's our objective?
No, I mean, it's exactly what I presented before. If you
So
want
it's
to
good
integrate,
reminder,
if you want to be able to put data together and work together, like it's more for data scientists. If you use ontology, you will be more talking to like the consumer of the data. That's why you do it. Of course, you're going to improve the search and all of that, but you can do it with the vocabulary.
Okay, so it's towards interoperable. Okay, I would be inclined to say towards interoperable livestock data or something, and that's an objective,
For the community.
And then you could say, what could we do towards that? I mean, I don't know whether, we could spend weeks discussing what are the components of a livestock ontology. I don't even know whether one is feasible. Will we ever have a livestock ontology? I mean, this is just a dream. Just let's be practical and say, what could we do to improve something like towards more interoperable livestock data or something? I don't know.
And that's
reusable.
And that's also what we did for the crops. I mean, we have small modular ontologies that cover like a given domain, and then, you know, if we need for one data set or one use case to use more of them, then, you know, we make the links afterwards. So I agree with
you could then say, okay, if we want to do that, what could we do? It's the steps. Your question a little bit. What will SEBI do, and what will others do?
So I think another thing is, so interoperable, but is that just for this community, or have we got an evangelical role here to try and encourage other people? So when we have to work with other data sets that aren't our own, we can pull, you know, so do we have a job in communicating out to the wider livestock community? So maybe that's another goal for us.
Definitely.
Are we happy with livestock? Do we want to have animal? Because fish is livestock. Should it be animal data? In developing countries, I mean, Ilri isn't interested in Scottish data, to be honest. I don't think.
Salmon.
Particularly interested. Not even salmon, no.
I suppose, I mean, GBAD obviously has more global scope. SEBI is mostly Africa and a bit of India. I don't know about other people around the table. And then I know Megan mentioned domestic animals. And she got elephants in there.
Canine animals.
Georgina with canine. So
So this is the first question of the kind of what are the individuals doing? So let's go through that. I think that's really worthwhile. So should I start with the people or with the domains?
People first.
Yeah. Okay. So we just go around the table, or.
I think one way of doing it is someone to start and say your name and then domains. The next person say, you know, those domains plus this other one. Just to kind of
okay. So
push it at the same time.
Who's kind of confident a good spoke, or maybe Georgina? She had a lot of well-defined.
Yes, I'm looking at poultry, and then canine data along with feline, so companion animals, and then hopefully bovine, looking at livestock. The other project, the Alpha project, is looking at sub-Saharan African farm networks. So they're looking at poultry, cattle, swine, a wider range of species.
Are you looking at production data or disease data?
Disease data, so mostly lab results, PCR and serology. And also, certainly the Alpha project, they run field trials of different technology. So digital hematocrit, field microscopes, quite interesting survey results there as well.
Okay. Hopefully I've captured most of that. I think what we might do is try and capture it and then circulate it so people can
validate it.
Yeah. But we can make a start.
Okay, so kind of picking up on the concepts or the domains that Georgina, so who else works on those topics and then we can kind of branch out?
I work a lot with lab data. Lab data, I would say. And so it's zoonotic diseases right now, so it would be a lot of poultry and bovine as well.
And if people want to, help me with the mapping process,
It's not an easy job.
No, I've never done this type of thing before. I don't know what it is.
It's so hard on paper.
Yeah. Maybe, do we have another colour? Because we could put a circle around what the first speaker said, Elizabeth, and then.
So guys, this is something that we need to do to achieve the goal. I don't think we should do it now.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, this is with how many? We're 5 organizations. I mean, I think this is something. I mean, but you're just prototyping.
Yeah.
This is what we should try to do.
Right.
This is what GBADS has done for its little piece. I mean, you could say this mapping is one of the things. For us to achieve that other objective, we have to map. But we should decide: is it animal and livestock? Is it global or developing countries? And my sense is that the ontologists are more outside development than inside development. It's my suspicion.
So could you
The developing
suggest,
world.
I mean, because you had that slide where you had like species, production types, and then sources of data. If something like that, if you could share something like that with Vanessa, and she could put on a place where we start putting our names around things.
Yeah, that would be the most efficient way to do it.
So I'm thinking if we could do
GBAD,
I
there's
manage
a GBAD
about
tool.
that. Yeah, we'd happily do that for some of the stuff we've got. And then I can even share some terms that we're using as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very interesting because we have a bit of lab data that we've not really used that was collected as another part of the project. And it's a very minor thing, but I was thinking that that's useful to know that it's not something I'm going to put a lot of effort into. But then if I ever get a bit of lab data again, there's other people that have got it covered.
But we are using laboratory data for the purposes of the map.
The systematic map, yeah. They're from journal articles, but like you said, it's diagnostic tests, and then we've actually got that lab data, real, from the lab. So, so that, I mean, I think, Dora, you're going to be our ontology curator.
So like for Ulrich, we work on feeds, breeds, health, markets, environment. Livestock, we did a lot of work with both fish in the past, animal, fish, not much. Developing countries, animal and human health. But in relation to zoonotic diseases, we have the lab data, we have the genomic data, we have the method. I mean, there's tons of stuff. I mean, you could have a whole workshop just to describe what Ulrich does. So I don't know whether we can, but it may be useful to say, as a result of this, we should make a little profile for livestock data, actors or something. I don't know what you want to call them, but just try to get a picture.
Yeah.
Is it lab stuff? Is it machine readable? Is it on paper? Is it in mobile phones? Is it on ODK? I mean, this is a PhD thesis.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, back to, because you said the livestock ontology, we were discussing fish. The name matters less if we're not going for one thing, if we're going for modules. And my data covers this, and I'm going to put something out there that covers it. If your data has the same and we're going to develop it together, maybe it's up to us to decide whether you're going to put one and I'm going to put another one that is interoperable, or if we're going to work together on one module that we put up. And then if we could have regular, maybe online meetings every 3 months or something, where we both discuss the strategies, and maybe we can highlight one thing Because, and this is just an example, I do not want to go into this technical discussion. I found out that the best way I could stay in touch with these GNFO people was we were using the same top-level ontology, which I resisted for years using because it's super philosophical. But it really helped me understand, I just had this criteria. Every time I decided to add a concept like disease, I had to decide if it was a thing, a process, or a quality or like an information thing. And I just deciding those sort of 4 things, I would look where they were putting things, and it helped us. So, we could talk about, okay, now we're too many on this group here, what strategy we're gonna have to cooperate in this specific group versus strategies for a big group. But I agree with what was said, that we don't need a Livestock ontology. I'm going to annotate my data for my purpose, you're going to annotate your data for your purpose, and we need to make sure that those live in the same place and that we have any strategy for interoperability. I was very surprised that on the conference now that we were at, someone put like AgroPortal as a resource, as if it was like a ontology. It was like, it's not an ontology, it's a website where people put ontologies, and those are not even necessarily interoperable. I mean, but if we are committed to our strategy for cooperation is we're going to put our ontologies in AgroPortal, and we're going to have a high-level diagram that shows people how they connect and what concepts they're covered. That's enough. It doesn't need to be the Livestock ontology to be called anything. It's just a community that has this list and the resources are kept track of somewhere.
Yes, a catalog of ontologies in a place with web services and APIs and open space. They don't all have to be integrated or anything like that. They just have to be there, right?
But I mean, if we use like the same top domain ontology like they did in the life sciences with this Obo Foundry initiative, then it really helps because of course you don't map at first, but because it's all using the same paradigm, at the end it's linked. If you need it, it's linked. If you don't need it, it's not linked. But that's good practice, and I think so I will also recommend to have like this top level paradigm, even if we don't understand everything. I mean, it just for the next step will be easier.
But I mean, on the modes of Obo Foundry, and I not suggest we're going to have a Foundry, but they don't have like a ontology. They have a set of principles. And if you follow those principles, if you're in the group, you follow those principles, and that's more or less what we have to evolve to. It's not like we're gonna think about that, but keep documenting what we've agreed. We agreed that the group's going to do this, or And I would say about that whenever I'm talking to the people in my domain, if I have a bot that says diseases, I don't show them anything of the complexity of how that goes on the ontology, like the top level, but I have a color code of that. I know, it's a thing, it's a process, so I know where it goes, and it's color coded, and if someone was to look at it, but I hide that complexity. And actually, if you were to go, because we were trying to use Web Protege for a while, so everyone could contribute, that didn't work, but I keep all that complexity, because the ontologies are interoperable, I keep all that complexity on a little import, and I work on the concepts with my domain experts just as lists of vocabularies, and then when we want to publish, then I import the arrangement, and then everything gets put in place. So there are ways, there are strategies for us to work simple, but then make it interoperable in the end.
So this is helpful. So it's about, the kind of overall goal is to move towards more interoperable livestock data and doing it.
No animal data, then no fish.
Fish also.
Livestock and fish.
Okay.
I don't know.
Poultry, I think so.
Is poultry livestock?
But not fish. Fish is not.
No, for the fish, I think. Okay. And doing so kind of through modules, so sort of domain level modules where there'll be maybe a subset of this group with some additional organizations or partners working, and making sure that those modules somehow are interoperable. So that's our own data, promoting this approach also with wider, so anyone we work with, collaborate with. The group activities and outputs, I think an initial one is just mapping of who, sorry, my writing is not very good right now, of who works with what data where. Kind of ongoing regular discussions on our strategies to cooperate within the specific modules.
Can I ask a question about, the listing individuals and what data they use on? Could we also, this was Elizabeth's suggestion, that we also list about what efforts they're making to improve their area, like the little bit of they're doing?
Yeah.
Whatever actions they're taking.
And also which standard they use, if they use any, because that will be also relevant, if they try to build something by they using what's existing.
I think Louise, you'd suggested whether you're a producer or consumer might be quite useful for us as well.
Because I guess it comes down to that classification if you're an ontology person or more of a, and then I guess working out that you're a consumer, but then if there's nobody working in your area, what do you do then? At least perhaps list those terms and then continue.
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, nobody's developing ontology just for the sake of, so nobody's just a producer. But even in a group, you have more the people who are more worried about the ontology and the people who are more worried about the use. So I think it makes sense.
I think I like also the idea if we have these sort of meetups in 3 months, like your knowledge. I have been somebody has that sort of icon and I haven't overly. But I think, those sort of suggestions as well, that even if there's people not necessarily in this group working on something, just to say, well, there might be other people, I think that'd be very valuable.
Okay, and then the strategy, I just put what you said into the summary. So kind of the overall strategy is, I guess, ultimately we would put our ontologies into Agroporto? Portal, sorry.
I mean, it's one of them.
That's one place. That's
it's one.
Or one place.
One place, yeah.
I mean, no. I don't think you should put it in one place, to be honest.
No.
I mean, I think you should put it on whatever's right for you, but it has to have the right principles and guidelines and standards and be open and accept shares. I mean,
and if you agree to the OBO-foundry principle, then I mean, you will be on every registry, so really automatically. So.
Yeah, but it's really hard.
But I guess it's useful to at least have an overview somewhere available of what's been developed. So they can live anywhere as long as they follow the correct systems.
And that's not that hard. I'm part of the OBO.
That's
not that hard. I'm part of an OBO.
Oh, good. So we have an inside connection.
You are part. Sorry, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I like all the rights on GitHub and everything. So if you
I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay. We need to talk to you.
This is really helpful because I've heard that I think Vanessa said we should look at OBO-foundry and I hadn't really understood what it was and how it related. So it's more the principle. Whereas, but then you could lodge it in different repositories. But if we make it OBO-foundry, then you don't even have to worry.
And you get a bunch of tools already that they develop. I mean, you don't have to worry about like plenty of small things that would take a lot of time. You don't have to think about them. They're already well documented and they can be used by anyone that is a little geeky.
But is that on GitHub? You said.
Yeah, the OBO-foundry.
Because I was thinking that's something you and Laura probably
Okay. So anyone that is I think, I mean, this meeting is a good start, and then that'd be good, like more for the more technical part, if the training is needed. Because I've been trained by someone that comes to Biodiversity and really was part of this NSF project, working with these big ontology people. So that's how I was trained. And so, everybody can be trained. I mean, it's just a question of sitting and, everything is online.
Yeah.
They have all the tutorials, everything. So that it's quite easy if you want to do it and you have time to do it, or you have to do it.
So that could be something potentially down the road is
kind
of a technical training.
Or
giving people access to those materials, pulling them together.
I think you asked earlier about Sabi's role in all of this, and I know that Vanessa had offered that we would convene this group, and as part of our responsibilities in LD4D, we pull people together to examine livestock data challenges and try and move forward on them. So, I think Vanessa might give me a bad stare, but I think we would probably be happy to perform that function for this group if people were happy with it.
Yeah. The knowledge, like essentially knowledge sharing, convening, facilitation. We're part of the CGR Big Data platform. Marie-Angelique is part of the Big Data Platforms community on ontology, so there's definitely this clear need to work together with her group since they have expertise, and there's a precedent for that.
I'd very much say that it would be a community effort, so it would have to be everyone, helping out to move it forward, because I think there's a lot of people with bits of information around the table. We've got 2 data scientists and sort of domain expertise, but you all have the pieces of the jigsaw.
Yeah, I mean, essentially everyone is working towards their self-interest, right? Their institutional, their project, whatever it is. And the goal here is to sort of add value to that so that whatever comes out of your bit of work is valuable and useful and has longevity for use by the broader livestock community. So I think that's what LD4D can offer in terms of added value, and what can we do as a group that otherwise is not possible by one individual or one institution. So that but happy to hear if people disagree or.
One thing I should say is that this was kind of a new working group. We do have other working groups that have been ongoing, but we haven't an allocation of resources, so I'd have to speak to the director if there's any resource requirements. But we do have a website that Gareth is working on, livestockdata.org, which will host information on our different working groups. We can have sort of blogs. We can hold if there are fact sheets or if there's guidance notes.
We have a lot of good presentations that
we can create presentations. So I'm just saying that's an offer that we do have working groups. This could become an LD4D working group if that's what you want. And the website that we're creating is kind of for the community, by the community, really. It's not SEBI sort of saying, ta-da, it's for the community, and we've been quite adamant about trying to differentiate SEBI and the community.
And I mean, there's a lot of people here who weren't in this room or on the web chat who are still very, very interested, but they couldn't attend for different reasons. And so, I think as we, get together virtually over the next year or so, there's going to be different configurations of people coming and going. But I think it needs to be driven by our self-interest in a way, but hopefully there's enough that the individuals are getting out of the group discussions that you continue to participate. So is there more that needs to be added here? I mean, obviously I can circulate this and people can think about it a bit more and come back and say, actually, what we need to be doing is something else. Karen,
Sorry, I'm just wondering if we need to consider additional participants. I think somebody put up a slide with somebody they met this week. Sorry, I forgot the name.
Monica Solanki.
Monica, and also we had a wee bit of a discussion about industry and that they've all their different naming of different diseases. Do we need to invite Steve and Zoetis or whoever to the table, or maybe that's too complicated and we need to get our own house in order? Just put that out there.
I think it's a role for the members of this group to be able to suggest who's missing. I think that's how we've come to even this group, is that I talked to one person who said, oh, you really need to talk to these 3 people, and then those 3 people each had 4 other people, and I think that's the only way to do it. So if you know someone who's either doing something really great in this domain and you want them to be involved, or someone who could really benefit from learning because they're somewhere earlier on the path, but I think we can all be it's promoting this approach with the wider livestock and fish community. So, we can be a little bit evangelistic about, oh, have you heard of this? Come along. And I think it is very much for those who are willing to participate, then you can get something out of it. So if I sort of maintain the email list, so if you send me an email, I can add people, and we can just see how that works. We have an online workspace. I haven't had any feedback from anyone saying that it's off, so I'm going to keep building it up.
Is that the Microsoft thing?
The SharePoint.
Yeah, you can take me off it,
Take you off it?
No, I don't work with Microsoft.
Okay.
They're closed. Unless I'm forced to for Hillary, but for things like this, take me off. I don't want to have any SharePoint.
Okay.
It's a closed system.
Right.
But if you'd like to work in closed systems, you can, please.
Yeah, I mean, we're constrained because we're with the University of Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And we use the software they offer us. If people have suggestions for other systems,
What would you suggest, Peter?
It depends what you want to do with it. There's many other platforms you can use. It depends on what, I mean, communities of practice need. Yeah, there's hundreds of different types. Yeah.
We can use Git, but Git's again owned by Microsoft now.
Yeah, I know many of them are.
That's
Yeah,
pretty much
yeah. No, I just don't want to be locked into another SharePoint.
What does the CG use?
SharePoint.
But I minimize my use of those.
Okay. I mean, essentially, we need a place to have our paper trail, right, of all of our meetings and presentations, resources, and so forth. So, yeah.
Would we just be able to use our web area? I mean, the presentations, etc.
On livestockdata.org.
Livestockdata.org. So it's open for anyone to see.
Yeah, we can just upload stuff there.
And you can just put news updates. We had the meeting. This is the findings. Everyone can see it. And then it's links to presentations. We could even password protect them if people are a bit sensitive.
Yeah.
And then that gets around.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite personal. You guys can, if you want to use SharePoint, it's all fine.
Peter, we want you to play.
Yeah, I'm not a huge
It's really
fan of
hard
being
because if
locked
you go
into,
with
yeah.
something like Google, then some of our European institutions don't allow us to upload data to US based. So you never find one solution that works for everyone.
Slack might work. You can not Slack.
You just want a
Slack.
collaboration mechanism.
Yeah, it's paid after a while.
Yeah.
Like it's only free for small groups, isn't it?
No, it could be for a group like this. You can carry on with the free model.
Yeah, I've never used it. Okay, so that's operational stuff. So we'll keep those comments in mind. You know, I think the idea is that we don't want to kind of prevent people from accessing. At the moment, it's quite straightforward stuff: presentations, documents, links, and so forth. So that you can there's any number of ways to do that. But we don't want it to be just an email because then people lose track completely. So we do need a space to put stuff. What do you use for the your COP?
Yeah, SharePoint. So those steps around, if we're mapping what we work on, you've got three types of people here. So the actual crop ontologists are part of this, but it's part more, I guess the interest is that you're actually ontologists. So this is an important area with livestock linking with the CG. So then there will be more the producers that would be doing that mapping exercise. So how many different groups would we have? I'm just thinking there's GBAD, Beehive. We will do it. I'm just trying to think how many different fish. And so then working out how many different maps we're going to have as a starting point, and then probably having some sort of meeting. I mean, we can perhaps collate the maps. I'm just trying to work out.
I mean, we maybe can build the sort of framework maps and then start putting what we know in, and then circulating that to see if people have something to add.
I mean, like the you showed. I mean, how much detail should we have? So do you think something like that quite high level domain?
Yeah, I wonder if it's too optimistic to think that it will just grow organically, that if we put something really high level, people will specialize it just to what, they will bring it down to the level they need to describe what they're doing. And if you put something like production systems, I will either put my name next to production system, or I'll pull an arrow that says, dairy production system, and I'm working there. So I wonder if we started with something really big, high level, and put it in a place where people can add their names or pull arrows, and if we let it circulate for a while, including, as you said, inviting people who couldn't be here today to comment on it, and after that has made the round, we could have an online meeting to then just identify groups in there.
And even those high level groups, this is a bit of a stupid question, but I was thinking, how would you even call those or pick those? Because you've got agribox, so we're talking you've got animal health and maybe animal production.
Yeah.
And then you're then saying perhaps start bringing it down, I'm interested in dairy, and then I don't know, milk or production systems.
But it depends on how because it's if everyone puts their name on production systems, I would call it the production system group. If everyone puts their name on dairy, I would call it the dairy group. So I think it really depends on
where people start putting their names and then bringing
I know
it
it's a bit optimistic to expect that it will grow so organically, but I think we really don't know. Yeah, we just don't know where we are, I think. And it would be nice to let people just label themselves something so that we can have a meeting online in some time. I don't know how much time.
These subgroups.
Well, a meeting online where people kind of look at it and say, okay, let's form a subgroup here, let's form a subgroup there, or not. Let's not form a group. Let's just have a meeting all together again in 3 months. But during those 3 months, I am really going to contact Louise every week. And an example. I'm just saying maybe some things don't need a group. It's just 2 people who's really connected, and it's like, let's keep our connection. The group's gonna meet again in 3 months. But it would be nice to have a chance to look at the diagram and think as a group, what's the next step?
And when actually, I mean, when you're saying about having a diagram and people start putting names, what type of format do you want? Just like Word document or something even, or?
I was thinking something because there's like the diagram. I PowerPoint. I don't know. I do all my diagrams online on this diagram app. It's online, and you just. Yeah, I send it to you. It lives in a Google folder, so it's a PowerPoint. I have to see what is there. But I mean PowerPoint, really.
Or even there's like these whiteboard kind of things where you can literally just freehand.
Yeah.
I mean,
mind map type things.
our Collaborate software does have a whiteboard. I don't know if I can just set up something that's a plain whiteboard.
Yeah, I think even PowerPoint. I mean, because if it starts getting out of hand, you can draw out of a slide. You just zoom out. I think it's as a brainstorm. I have to go.
Yes,
but you please. I don't want to disturb the dynamic just because I left.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, and I will stay in touch with. I mean, at least the 2 of you to see how the discussions evolve.
If your taxi doesn't come and get me. I mean, I see it back here, so that's
yours. And just get my certificate from somewhere.
Yeah, that they called you, so that's yours.
To be frustrating.
Okay, good. So we have half an hour until lunch. If people feel like we've covered everything that we can cover, we can just go early. But if there's more to discuss, if you want to just have a bit of informal.
Yeah, it's me. It's my text.
Yeah. If you want to just, follow up and sit next to someone and do a bit of informal chat and networking, that's also fine. What would people
online guys
prefer? Oh yeah, are they still there?
A lot of them have gone. Georgina is still there, so
Hi,
I
Georgina.
send a picture. She wanted to see an image of the flip chart.
I couldn't see the whiteboard, but it sounded very useful.
Because that camera won't pick up.
No.
So I'll send it.
You can probably just upload it. Okay, yeah, well, thanks, Georgina. We'll make sure to send that, if you can, I might rewrite it, and send that across. And we have Dora taking diligent notes, so we'll have a sort of post-meeting summary, which will circulate, and people can check if anything's missing. Yeah, but do people just want to engage in a bit of open-ended chat right now, or your tummies are rumbling and you're ready for some delicious Scottish lunch?
We can always go early.
Yeah, I can check if it's okay, but yeah. So are we good? Actually, I did have a little closing exercise that we can decide as a group if we want to do this. So just like we did at the beginning where you had your individual reflection in the groups, I was going to suggest we do the same thing and have a little brainstorm on what opportunities do you see for making progress on this challenge. Is that worth doing, or do you feel like we've covered it, or maybe something new will emerge?
Yeah, not everyone's spoken, so maybe.
Yeah. Should we take 5 or 10 minutes to do that? Yeah? Okay. Good. So 1 minute, thinking to yourself, you can make a little note. So what opportunities do you personally see in making progress on the challenges that have come up here, or what's something that you're going to do maybe as a follow-up specifically, and then we'll take a chance to pair up and discuss those things.
So what's the question about the challenges?
So it's either like what opportunities do you see this group might have in addressing the challenges, or you can also think about what you yourself are going to do, tomorrow as a result of these discussions.
Not in a vote.
Oh yes.
That's today, though, yeah. Tomorrow, yeah.
Anyone who can vote, don't forget to
Well,
I vote for ontologies.
I vote goes to Livestock.
Yeah. Truth.
Yeah.
Data-driven, evidence-driven. Truth.
It's truthy.
Yeah.
Okay, one interrupt. So take your minute, please.
Yeah, that's why you obviously know. I think that was fine.
Yeah, and after you've had your minute, then you can find Paul and help.
Sort of dual role or something. Yeah, they got away with it. Yeah, yeah, actually, I was and I've just got this email today saying you need to renew. Like, oh, I hope you continue to renew Liverpool policy. So yeah, about like. Murdoch, which is Western Australia.
Okay, do people want to pair up maybe with a new person? You might have to kind of scooch around, or you want to come around. Don't jump over this.
Right. Okay.
Do you your moving forward? I think stay in touch is really valuable. I don't want to put together. Yeah, outside of GIR actually. Yeah, I mean, if you look at the wider group, there's one in the West, like, which was seem to be but the no, that's good. For me, it's very helpful. It's good to hear from you that you feel like there's a so I think one of my greatest feelings comes to being like going forward. And like the more we can do it, and we'll do
I was assuming that you have to
Good, okay. Do people want to move into Tor?
Somehow we each have a database, and then there's some ontologies.
Georgina sharing some.
Yeah, she's sent me some comments.
I'm seeing a lot of
yeah, it's like already Google harvest our database. It already everything's already harvested. But you go straight from here to here.
I feel a lot better in the side of
You need to
my
show that ontology will make it
but yeah. It says here. Yeah. I mean, that system's good as well. Once you master it, it's really logical.
So that's why I assumed that you then have.
Okay, tell her that we'll ask Jackie to respond.
Presumably you have a and you can sort of say, show me the ones
Once you
that
start seeing who's working
tells
in
me
which
X and show me
areas,
the
and
one
you
that
sort
tells
of
me
overlays,
I
it sort of
assume,
takes the
but I
pressure
don't know
off.
how you would use.
Yeah,
I don't really know how many there are.
you know,
You know whether it needs to be.
working.
There are lots of words that you
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
one.
Because it helps you with,
Yeah,
because everybody has ontologies there, yeah. I mean, for me also, I have my database. I can improve my database by applying that ontology to it. Yeah. So that she has an ontology about animal health, I can stick to her ontology and somehow I can use that to improve what comes out of my database.
Great, so I think we're almost, we'll let you guys wrap up. I think it would be great to hear just maybe from each group 1 or 2 or 3 of your sort of key thoughts on opportunities moving forward. I know that there were 2 people left clinging on. Georgina, your chance. I know it's not easy. Maybe let's hear from you first on what you feel are the greatest opportunities moving forward, and then we'll just go around and then we'll wrap up. Still there? Oh.
Who's presenting?
She's presenting.
Hello, Georgina, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we're just wondering if you wanted to say your take home, your thoughts.
Yes, can do. I haven't got as far as thinking which groups I'd like to work with because all of the presentations had some degree of overlap with what we're trying to do. Oh, great! Thank you for the picture. I was thinking up because Beehive work quite closely with Zoetis. It would be worth involving them at a later stage of the process. Obviously, going to tell them that I've been to this session and what I've got out of it. I was interested in looking at Dublin Core for cataloguing the records. So I hadn't really thought about that for a number of years. I think that's an obvious one. So I'll look into that, and also looking at AgriVoc for the links into that ontology. So that would make it more interoperable, which is the vision for the Dire project. As a group, I like the idea of looking at what those real high-level terms would be, because when I was trying to come up with the little taxonomy I was trying to do, working out what, so I was using PMES, so looking at the personality of that domain. So I was looking at animal health, and then just trying to fit the other things into it and decide what is a thing, what is a process, what the time scales and units are going to be. So it'd be quite good to collaborate on something along those lines.
Great. Thank you, Georgina.
Thank you.
Can we hear from some people or in this group?
I have to say one of the things that I got really excited about is the opportunity to train, to actually know more about sort of that, where you start with an ontology and making sure that we use an ontology or build an ontology in a standardized way as a kind of starting point.
So you feel that this was a good kind of exposed you to some of the steps involved? Does it sound like you want to be, you want there to be more kind of trainings or guidelines or resources?
Well, I think that, as Marie was saying, that it's out there, so we just need to go on and access it.
But having it signposts might be easy.
Yeah.
Help,
These 3-month meetings, it might be useful that if you're stuck on something or you've got a question, you know that there's a forum.
Yeah.
They're all going to be different consumers or producers and different levels of expertise.
Yeah,
they're willing to do that.
Yeah, and from what I've seen, a lot of people are cleaning data in a way, like in their different projects. And so that would be good, like when you standardize something or you use a tool, or I've heard about ODK and different systems where they have the list built in the tool.
Yes.
That would be so much. I mean, for interoperability purpose, all this list can be, and our cleaning process really can be materialized outside, and published somewhere. So then this is how you start building on them, on top of them, like, and also painting the links and all of that. So that would be also the first step. I mean, for any standard that is existing in this community, that is built in a tool or in a database, or I don't know. I mean, that would be, yeah, just extracting that first and making that available somewhere for the other. I mean, that's also really important, I think.
Because that would be of interest to me as one of the things, as one of the calls you've mentioned at the point where people actually create the data to try to build it into the tools of how it's capturing the data. And that might be a bit later down the line, but just, working out that having it somewhere and just saying these are a suggested name of terms that you could use. And if you are building a system to collect data, maybe you could think, because I don't know how precious people are about what they call certain things, or whether they just pick something, but if there's somewhere where you could suggest.
Yeah, I don't like their names, but that's not.
I guess that's something I don't know how much people would be willing to do, but I think at least even saying that this is a list of terms you could use would be good.
I'm just wondering if Peter has any insights on how this could be relevant to the ROMIS team at all.
Yeah, they're about to release everything, aren't they?
They are, but they're kind of really trying to standardize data capture, but obviously they're not like connected to this discussion. And they don't only work on livestock; they work on kind of household level.
Yeah.
But that would be interesting. I mean, Mark's coming to one of the LD40s, and I'm just thinking it'd be even interesting just to say, do you actually capture information on disease as part of the? I mean, I'm not quite sure how low level they go with ROMIS, or whether there is like a drop down.
Different modules, they're building different modules.
Yeah. So if they had modules around any livestock or disease or productivity, then it would make a lot of sense to try to connect with them.
Yeah. But Alan Duncan has a widely used the feast.
I'm actually going to work with him a bit on the feast. It's actually on the data, so we've got.
That's one of the things. But that's a big, and that's also all standardized. It's all standardized, but whether it's an ontology or not, I don't know. But it's a standard. You collect data in a certain way, you describe it, you measure it. All the variables are standardized. Especially you choose between which production system it is, size of that. I mean, there's lots of variables that are all standard.
Yeah, but
I don't think it's an ontology.
No, but that's not the issue. Essentially, you can use this standardized list only if you use ROMIS. If you want to use something else because you're not, for whatever reason, you cannot. So, it would be much better that they can flip the two. Then that would be really an added value. That's what, and that's what you did also, like all the in the CG space, all those lists that are specific to a center. They live by themselves. I mean, which is good because if someone wants to use part of it, or they can still do it.
So we've allowed that. But like we've got the cleaned tool, there's the ROMIS, and then there's these three tools. They all do slightly different things, but there's elements of them which are the same. And the thing is, are those elements the same? I don't really know. And the feast one only collects feed information. It doesn't collect health information. But you could ask health questions. They just never have. It's a feed tool. So that's how they.
That could be something for later, but it's interesting you mentioned it because I haven't heard it being talked about, but we were going to do a bit of work.
It's the biggest constraint to livestock. Forget
health. So it might be something that we could even have like a little box on this diagram, very high level, saying in the future we may be working in that area with Alan.
And I've been pushing Alan to move his aggregator to a proper open platform because he's built it on a closed one.
Keep pushing.
But I think he's going to talk to you guys.
He's already given me some data, but we're going to meet next year just to see.
Because he has hundreds of individual, but he also has his aggregator. Anyway, that's a whole site.
I mean, just on the same topic, I mean, everyone knows Meda Devara. I don't think maybe Megan, you do. So she's with the CGIAR Big Data Platform, and she's involved in the Agris, which is that?
No, Guardian.
Oh, no, not Guardian. But what's the one that they're using for data collection?
Agrofilms.
Agrofilms, thank you. But when she heard sort of that we were starting to talk as a community, she said, at the moment, Agrofilms doesn't have any way of like standardizing data collection in terms of livestock. They're doing it, I think, prioritizing crops at the moment, and this would be a clear use case for what comes out of this community. So she was quite excited to hear that.
But probably needs some livestock experts to work with.
And again,
she knows nothing about livestock.
And I think if we so for this in this project, I mean, I'm involved also in that. We develop an ontology. We're using the OVO principle. So the same way, I mean, for the livestock, even if it doesn't fit in this ontology per se, if we use the same principle and model the things the same way, then at the end it's going to be interoperable because I mean there's in this we have like a field and a plot, and I mean I don't think this is relevant at all for fish, for instance. Although they still have a plot, but
they'll have a pond.
It doesn't have like soil, for us like a plot has a soil and everything. So
But the principle is that the principles
Yeah,
should
yeah,
be
yeah.
what the group should design the principles.
Yeah,
Agree the principles. That's what's most important. It doesn't matter what people, as long as the principles are followed,
yeah.
so to speak.
So how would we agree those? How would we move towards?
Well, that's one of the
agreeing
things
with
that, well, I think the previous, I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things is to agree, she mentioned it, there's some principles that you follow, I don't know where,
move toward
top level, yeah, I'm not sure, but there are some
agreement on top
principles
level.
of behavior,
Yeah, yeah.
of ways to do it, following standards,
Yeah.
using certain types of platforms, I don't know. There must be a whole bunch of things that are best practice.
I
or
mean,
good
if there
practice.
if there are best practice and guidance and
Yeah.
whatever else, it'd be really good if everyone could feed them into
Yeah.
Vanessa, and we can organise them on a web area so everyone can access them. So whether
Yeah.
that's different ontologies or guidance or
Yeah.
principles, whatever, and then maybe from there we can start. I don't know whether we need to
Yeah.
create our own or.
Because Obo sounded like a
Yeah.
way of ensuring best practice, right? I never use it, I don't really know what it is, yeah.
So and that's something maybe the crop community already has documented all of best practices and so forth.
Yeah, partly. Yeah, I can put that together.
Good.
With the mapping exercise, are we also going to put like any standards or things that we've thought about? Because I heard Georgina mention about Agravoc, and she was going to start looking at some terms that might be relevant for her. And I know that we've sort of connected with Elroy, and we know some terms that you're using. I'm just.
If we can summarise
Yeah.
our actions and our current activities and our current independent goals out with this group, that would be useful.
I think so, just like the map, but then also maybe what standards you are thinking about using. And then maybe that's kind of what the names anyway. I think it's just what we're doing so far. If she's already started Agravoc and what terms she thinks are useful, that'd be quite interesting to see.
Yeah, we're going to start doing
We're
that.
thinking of using the same terms.
Yeah, and I want to mention on Agravoc that we had a meeting with like the person in charge of Agravoc last week, and so now they are really keen to also, if there is missing part in Agravoc, to have people contributing like the terms. So you just need basically at least a name and a definition. So now they really don't have definition, and then what they provide in return is like the translation, because in all the languages, because they have now this network of people that gonna translate the content. So that would be also something that would be that they would be interested in.
Yeah,
and
there-
also put you in contact with them.
I went to one of their recent webinars where they're promoting the development of a schema. So some domain level. So the example they gave us Landfox. That landscape community has developed their own vocabulary, and now they're trying to make sure that it sort of exists as a sub schema of Agravoc and feeds back in somehow. And so that was something I was quite interested to understand.
So I'm not a big fan of this approach because, I'm really not a big fan of how they do it. And when I ask questions, they are still figuring out something where at the end you can end up having something that is totally not consistent because you don't consider the entire vocabulary. So I'm really not a fan of that. But the approach of trying to be modular and working on your area of expertise, I would recommend to always try to map that to an Agravoc term and start from there, and not and push that back to the main Agravoc. That will reduce issues when, particularly because they were discussing interoperability and all of that. Agravoc, most of the use case people are using it for as tags. So the hierarchy and everything doesn't really matter. You just have that control vocabulary, so the same language. So that's one thing that is good already, because that's already challenging for university. But if we are trying to next step and do that will be a problem.
Do you think it would be value in actually just seeing if people do use Agravoc and seeing what terms they're using as part of this work as well?
I think
because then you would see, like you were saying, you always try to get that high level term where you then. So it's sort of a bit of a parallel activity.
Exactly. And also using Agravoc, as I say, an ontology cannot exist without vocabulary. So if you already identified all the terms that are relevant for your domain or your application, then you already have something to start building the ontology and even looking at what is already existing in the ontology world. Like you can identify ontology through this process, so that's already very valuable, I think.
Because one thing I was thinking just for me might be helpful is if we are mapping out this domain just to see in Agrabot what terms, high-level terms they use to call these domains to get an idea of what the
Yeah, but
domain.
this I don't know if it's going to be, yeah.
Do you think it might, I'll have a quick look, do you think it might be a bit difficult?
No, it's not going to be difficult, but it's been, yeah, they have like really the broad categories and yeah, I mean, maybe
Very
it will
massive.
work, maybe it would, yeah.
Very broad.
Yeah.
Very broad. But I think that what is useful here is that there are steps towards our goal.
Yeah.
Vocabularies are a good step.
Yeah.
Ontologies are another step.
Yeah.
So we should try to recommend, we shouldn't be too narrow and say we're only about ontology.
No.
It's about any way of standardizing vocabularies or
we might
whatever
want
you
to be
call
in
that.
the group.
You want to be a bit open. If you limit yourself and say we're only about ontologists, then most people will drop out and you become a little.
Yeah, that's what Fernanda said. I mean, if you talk to people, domain experts, I mean, they don't want to see the complexity or anything. They are just interested in providing their knowledge. So we need to be simple also.
Yeah, and I think that we've tried to keep it. Although it's called Livestock Ontologies, we might just have to rename it, but we tried to keep it as broad and inclusive as possible. All right. Any final thoughts, actions?
So we talked about this demystifying and demonstrating.
Go on.
I would love to see an actual demonstration of the value proposition for a policymaker of using an ontology.
So policymaker, yeah.
Or a farmer. Somebody mentioned farmers. I don't believe the farmers will benefit. Well, who knows? But even for a researcher, why would Alan Duncan adopt an ontology for his speech?
A very good presentation during this meeting. Yeah, but I think they're going to have that. It was from Bayer. So the company, and I think all the slide and the video is going to be available, and it was very good because it really started from the data science point of view, so reusing like trying to have that this scientists doing science with the data, and then starting from that to be like to have like their knowledge graph, and then so they needed an so it was very clear how they can benefit from having that.
So I just say I think it probably exists, but anyway, it'd be good to have. We said to demystify and demonstrate because people, if you use the word ontology, as Jackie says, she doesn't like to use the O word in there.
I must admit, I find that as well. If I, when I was looking for a new job, when I'm talking about taxonomies and ontologies, people look blankly at me. But they're really useful things to have because I think for the Dyer project, intrinsic part of the value of that platform is interoperability with other systems, and in order to do that we need to have a strong foundation that matches up with our external sources. So I think it's very important for us to actually have an ontology that isn't just Dyer, it matches up with other APIs, other tools, systems, organizations.
The way you pronounce Dyer, it doesn't sound like a very positive, project.
Oh, there are many ways of pronouncing Dyer. Yes. The boss keeps saying Die Hard or Die Hard, which is not good.
I just want to get the value proposition, whether at some point we want to think about questions that we think ontology. I mean, I'm thinking for diseases, if we had a richer description of them, we could start asking new questions of the data. So one is, instead of just saying the diseases, like the syndromes, and then you could start saying, well, there's a lot of respiratory things happening here, and what does that mean? That maybe perhaps, or just being able to bring that data together and look at it more like an aggregate. But
I need to find new ways. Just because I know there's been an awful lot of people doing
easier things to do. If it's like, I guess, trying to sell that. And so if we didn't do it, does it? Why are we bothering?
Because even those little tags, those terms, you really have to force people to use them. These are communication people. I mean, in the past, the CGIAR has worked a lot with FAO. There was this application protocol. Everybody was going to do this very advanced indexing. Not one center had implemented it because they had no capacity to the time. People don't realize as soon as you start launching these systems, they're very time consuming at the end. Some poor editor somewhere, if you do the handheld part, has to enter and do all this, has to plow through aggregates. It's a lot of work.
So that's why.
So you have to find very straightforward, clear value propositions.
I mean, even sharing that, because when we start tagging content, that's what I was a bit worried about, that we didn't even have any standards. And so we spoke to the developer yesterday, and I actually was saying, well, how do you actually even, what's the methodology around tagging? And he was sort of saying that, for example, with that systematic map, it's covering ruminants. So instead of saying goat, whatever, sheep, and things, we need to say it's ruminants, and then it's going to fall underneath, but keep it high level.
Yeah, but that's your.
But that's the methodology that I didn't know about that. But then having that standard list that we control, and even have a guideline for people that are tagging it. That, typically, and I think that's it. So say, for example, what the product is, what the species is, and then it's sort of animal health disease, not going to the level. I think even that, just simple stuff like that, would be helpful to start sharing.
Yeah, well, all we have is very simple guidelines. You know, you must have a country, you must have a project, you must have an investor, you must have a CRP. For us, you must have, if it's about an animal of some kind, which is it? I mean, we have simple things like that. You shouldn't have a document that comes out that doesn't have the animal mentioned, for example, tag. It's a social tagging.
I think
but it's very good. But it's very the CTA, they have a very complicated website where they generate all their the terms automatically. So every blog post, there's about 70 terms automatically generated, but 60 of them to me like they're randomly useless. But the system is so intelligent to generate 70 terms. So
But
to me, it's like
if the
there's no
system
control
was
vocabulary.
working, if the system was working with the control vocabulary,
They don't have it,
then the list will be much better. So
they don't use the control vocabulary. They only rely on this automatic indexing,
But then
and you
maybe
get
that's
complete
the value
rubbish.
proposition. But actually, we had a controlled vocabulary. We could do automated
But
tagging,
they don't
which
have
would make
people.
all this stuff much more searchable.
But they didn't have people to do the tagging. They just said the system will do it. Dream. So really, it's a trade-off.
I'm interested to hear that because I've spent a lot of time working for Yale.com, and we went to great lengths to build a thesaurus and then several ontologies that talk to each other. And then technology was moving on, and we were being sold on this auto classification and clustering. It's quite interesting to hear that it's rubbish.
Well, there's one thing I told you, please don't quote me for the whole world. If you do a Google search, Google doesn't do any of that. On Google, you don't see anything. You don't get any of this clustering, and they don't do any of this stuff, do they? Google.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
they do it, but we don't. It's not advertised to us.
Yeah, for their knowledge graph. I mean, they have their own ontology. They have
and that's how they send us targeted things. But you don't see word clouds and tags and all this
but
stuff.
they have this behind the scene.
Very sophisticated. Yeah, I mean, The Guardian, I was looking at The Guardian recently. I said, I'll have a look at myself. And it told me that 2 of my publications were about the island of Niue in the Pacific. I have no idea. Some automatic index.
He's got some fake news.
Yeah, I got some fake products, That's automatic thing. They don't use our manually assigned.
And this is a huge issue, I think.
It's full of stuff. And another one, I'm publishing about Spain. How can I be publishing about Spain? Their system decided that I'm publishing about Spain.
You're on holiday.
You're on holiday.
But they're not indexed. They're not importing our control vocabulary. They're using these automatic systems. But
Good. Well, we managed to reach exactly 12:30, so I'm really pleased that we made the use of the time. I think this last discussion has been really helpful and practical. So thank you all so much for your time. I know you're all very busy. I learned a lot. I hope other people have too. I think there's a lot of follow-ups individually and as a group. Our goal will be hopefully by the end of next week circulate at least an initial wrap-up, just at least to have it as a placeholder for coming back to next year, and then maybe getting into this graphing exercise, charting things. So thanks again, and we'll see you again soon. And lunch is nice. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Garrett, for the amazing seamless tech support as well. And thanks, you can stop the recording. So
just
lunch
across the way.
Oh yeah, the one the 18th.
Yeah, it's just in the restaurant.